I was sitting alone at the darkest table in a luxury Manhattan ballroom when my daughter raised a crystal glass and smiled. My father-in-law taught me what real success looks like, she announced, before handing him the keys to a brand new luxury supercar. The room erupted in applause. Then she walked toward me. "Dad," she said loudly, tossing a cheap toy car onto my table, "this suits you better." Laughter echoed around the room. I stared at the little plastic car in my hand and quietly stood up. What nobody in that ballroom knew was that this would be the last night anyone treated me like a man who had nothing. I appreciate you being here with me. Before we start, drop a comment below. What time of day is it where you are, morning, afternoon, or evening? Your presence genuinely matters. One thing to mention. Certain details have been recreated for storytelling and reflection. The heart of this story, the message about family and justice, is what I hope stays with you. I sat at the table they'd placed in the shadows, the one reserved for people who didn't matter, and watched my daughter shine like a star I'd never be allowed to touch. The Summit Tower ballroom stretched 72 floors above Manhattan, all crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd arrived at 8:15 exactly on time, wearing the only suit I owned that still fit properly. The woman at the entrance had glanced at my name, frowned slightly, then gestured toward the back corner near the service entrance without meeting my eyes. My daughter, Vivica, 26, and radiant in her designer gown, stood at the center, accepting congratulations as Novatech's newly minted CEO. She moved through the crowd like light through water, effortless and untouchable. At the head table, Wendell Rivera, 65, and imperial in bearing, sat like a man accustomed to owning every room he entered. Silver hair, perfectly combed custom suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He raised his wine glass when Vivica gestured toward him, and 200 guests applauded. Beside my daughter stood Dashiell Rivera, 30 years old, and perfectly groomed with the easy confidence of someone who'd never earned anything in his life. Her husband. I looked down at my own table. White linen, silver settings, orchids, but positioned exactly where the shadows began, where the chandelier light didn't quite reach. 25 years in finance had taught me to read seating charts like balance sheets. This wasn't an accident. A waiter appeared, set down house wine without pouring, and disappeared. At the head table, a sommelier presented Wendell with a vintage that required white gloves to carry. At the bar's far end sat Noel Long, 58 years old, my former VP, and the only living soul who knew exactly who I really was. He nursed a scotch and stared at the television, never once glancing in my direction. In public, we were strangers. In private, he was the man keeping my secrets alive. Vivica's voice cut through the noise, amplified by microphone feedback. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." The room quieted instantly. Tonight isn't just about celebrating Novatech's success. It's about recognizing the people who made that success possible. She walked to the head table, heels clicking against marble. A server appeared with a silver platter, and on it rested a navy key fob with the Bugatti emblem gleaming under the spotlight. "My father-in-law," she said, her voice warm with genuine affection, "taught me everything about building real success, about vision, about execution, about never accepting second place." She lifted the key. "Wendell, you've been more than a mentor. You've been the father figure who showed me what leadership actually looks like." The applause was thunderous. Wendell stood, embraced her, took the key with the grace of a man accepting an Oscar. Someone shouted, "What did she get you, Wendell?" "A Bugatti Chiron," he announced. "License plate NYP 3047, waiting in the garage downstairs." More applause. Someone whistled. $3 million, I thought. She'd given her father-in-law a $3 million car. Then Vivica's eyes found mine across the room. The smile on her face shifted, became something else, something with teeth. She walked toward my table. No server, no silver platter. Just my daughter in her designer gown crossing the ballroom, while 200 people watched in silence. You need to understand something about public humiliation. It's not the act itself that destroys you. It's the 200 pairs of eyes pretending not to notice. Vivica stopped 3 feet from my table. In her hand was a red plastic toy car, the kind you'd find in a CVS checkout line. The price tag was still attached. $9.99. She threw it onto the white linen in front of me. It skidded across the tablecloth and stopped against my water glass. "Dad," she said loudly, that sugary tone she used when she wanted people to hear every syllable. "You've spent your life walking, contributing nothing to my career. This toy car suits your empty pockets perfectly." She paused. "Try learning from my father-in-law. He's the real father who helped me succeed." Soft chuckles rippled from adjacent tables. Someone coughed to cover a laugh. I heard a woman, "Oh my God, did she really just—" I didn't speak. Did not defend myself. I simply picked up the plastic car, turned it over in my hands, examined the price tag dangling from the miniature side mirror. Vivica waited, perhaps expecting me to react, to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. When I didn't, she turned on her heel and walked back to the head table. Dashiell draped an arm around her shoulders. Wendell raised his wine glass in my direction, a gesture that might have been mockery or pity. The ballroom resumed its celebration. The noise returned. The laughter. The clinking of crystal and the murmur of 200 conversations, pretending the last 3 minutes hadn't happened. I sat alone at my shadow table and felt the weight of cheap plastic in my palm. My wife's voice echoed from memory, from the hospital room, where she'd spent her final weeks. "Thurston, promise me you'll never let Vivica lose her father." I'd kept that promise through everything. Through her wedding to Dashiell despite my warnings. Through her coldness. Through tonight. But sitting there in the shadows, holding a $10 toy, while my daughter celebrated the man who'd replaced me, something inside me made a decision. A decision that had waited far too long to be made. I stood, without uttering a single syllable, slid the plastic car into my vest pocket, felt it press against my chest. Walked through the ballroom toward the exit, past tables where people deliberately didn't meet my eyes, past the bar where Noah Long continued staring at the television as though I didn't exist. I stepped into the Manhattan night at exactly 10:47. The city stretched out below me, a million lights that didn't care about humiliation, or plastic cars, or daughters who'd forgotten where they came from. In my vest pocket, cheap plastic. In my mind, a definitive decision. This was the last time I ever let another human being dictate where I sat. The freight elevator rattled to the 19th floor of a building that didn't exist on any public registry, carrying me toward a room my daughter had no idea I owned. I'd driven straight from the Summit Tower to the secure underground garage on West 43rd, parked in the spot I'd maintained for 11 years, and taken the service entrance, past the sleeping security desk. 40 minutes after walking out of that ballroom, I was stepping into a space that existed nowhere on corporate filings, nowhere on lease agreements, nowhere in the world, except in the minds of 3 people who knew how to keep their mouths shut. The door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Cold air hit my face, the kind of climate-controlled chill that kept servers happy and humans uncomfortable. Blue light emanated from wall-mounted screens, displaying data streams that never slept. The HVAC hummed its constant white noise. 25 years of Wall Street had taught me one lesson above all others: Zail power operates in rooms that don't have nameplates. This was Morgan Horizon Ventures headquarters. Not the polished office suite I'd maintained for public meetings back when I'd cared about appearances. This was the actual nerve center, the place where decisions got made and money got moved and nobody asked questions because nobody knew it existed. I pulled the plastic toy car from my vest pocket and set it on the desk beside the keyboard. $9.99 of red plastic price tag still dangling. Next to it, I placed my security key and watch. The contrast was almost funny. Almost. The terminal woke at my touch, biometric scanner, reading my fingerprint and iris. In the span of 2 seconds, the main dashboard loaded Morgan Horizon Ventures. Assets under management, $340 million. 23 active portfolio companies. 12 exits in the last 5 years. Return on investment, 37% annualized. I scrolled down the list of holdings. There, fourth from the top, Novatech Solutions. Committed capital, $50 million. Status active. My daughter had spent 2 hours tonight celebrating her CEO position at a company I'd funded with money she didn't know I had. She'd thrown a toy car at the man who'd written the check that built her empire. You want to know the difference between revenge and justice. Justice waits for the courtroom. Revenge builds the courtroom in secret and controls who gets to walk through the doors. I opened the Navy folder I'd prepared 6 months ago with Noel's help. Investment agreement, Novatech Solutions, Series A, preferred. 73 pages of legal architecture designed to protect my capital and give me exactly the leverage I needed when the time came. Clause 12.3, Material Breach and Remedies. I'd had 3 corporate attorneys review this language. 2 of them had called it draconian. The third had called it brilliant. All 3 had confirmed it was legally bulletproof. The clause was simple. If Novatech's executive board engaged in conduct materially adverse to investor interests, including but not limited to conflicts of interest, undisclosed related party transactions or breach of fiduciary duty, the lead investor could issue a notice to cure. The company had 24 hours to remedy the breach. Failure to cure triggered automatic capital clawback with 48 hours notice. I clicked the link. A dialog box appeared. Confirm initiation of material breach notice. Investment agreement clause 12.3. My cursor hovered over the confirm button. The plastic toy car sat beside my hand, a reminder of exactly why I was here. I pressed confirm. The system dispatched an automated notice to cure to Novatech's executive board at 11:59 p.m. Friday night. They had exactly 48 hours until 11:59 Sunday evening to respond. I knew they couldn't meet it. The breach I'd cited required board votes, legal opinions, and documentation they didn't have and couldn't manufacture over a weekend. Come Monday morning, I could trigger the clawback. $50 million yanked out from under Novatech's foundation. The company would survive probably, but Vivica's CEO tenure would be measured in weeks, not years. The terminal displayed the confirmation. Notice transmitted at 11:59 p.m. Novatech Solutions has until 11:59 p.m. Sunday, June 16th to respond. I sat back in the chair and felt something close to satisfaction. Not pleasure exactly. More like the cold clarity that comes from executing a plan you've been building in the dark for months. Then I opened the secondary desk drawer and pulled out the old manila envelope I'd been avoiding for 2 years. Inside was a single photograph, Vivica and Dashiell on their wedding day, June 2022. She was radiant in white lace. He was handsome in his tailored tuxedo. They looked like any other young couple in love standing on the steps of the Plaza Hotel with Manhattan glittering behind them. I flipped the photograph over. On the back, in Noel's precise handwriting, was a note dated 8 months ago. They knew Vivica was your daughter long before they ever accidentally met. Raymond Sterling ran a full background check on you 18 months before the wedding. This wasn't love. This was a targeted corporate strategy. 18 months before the wedding. That put the background check around December 2020. Vivica had met Dashiell at a charity gala in March 2021 or so, she'd told me. Their whirlwind romance, their engagement 6 months later, their beautiful wedding, all of it choreographed, all of it calculated. My wife's face flashed through my memory. Yvonne, who'd made me promise never to abandon our daughter, no matter what path she walked. I'd kept that promise through tonight's humiliation, but I'd never promised to keep it their way. My phone vibrated against the desk. A message from Noel. I found something else. This isn't just about money anymore. Call me when you're ready to hear it. I stared at the text, then at the wedding photo, then at the toy car sitting beside my keyboard. The things Noel had told me earlier tonight, on our encrypted call about Rivera Pharma, about clinical trials, about the deaths they'd covered up, were still seeping into my bones. But this message suggested there was more. Something worse than corporate fraud. Something worse than a manufactured marriage. I sat in that hidden office until the eastern sky over Manhattan began to turn a bruised pale gray. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it. Certain truths cannot be fully digested the moment they hit your ears. They need time to seep into your bones, and tonight they were seeping in deep. To truly understand what happened next. Why every calculated move I made carried the weight. Did you need to know exactly what Noel told me in the dead of that night? I sat in the server room on the morning of June 16th, with cold coffee beside my keyboard and steady rain beating the exterior walls. The blue monitors reflected off my face as I organized my thoughts with the deliberate composure that had kept me functional through 36 sleepless hours. The phone call had come at 2:15 a.m., exactly 20 minutes after I'd found the wedding photo with Noel's note scrawled on the back. His voice had been steady, clinical, the tone he used when delivering information he knew would destroy you. I closed my eyes and let myself replay every single second of that conversation. I need to tell you about NX774, Noel had said without preamble. No greeting, no apology for the hour. Just straight into the abyss. What's NX774, I'd asked. An experimental oncology drug. Rivera Pharma ran clinical trials 5 years ago. Your wife enrolled based on her primary physician's recommendation. The rain against the windows intensified. I listened to it now the same way I'd listened to the silence on the phone line that night, waiting for Noel to continue. Yvonne had no idea the Rivera Group controlled the strings, he'd said. The trial was marketed as cutting-edge cancer research. Participants were told they were helping advance medical science for future generations. My wife, Yvonne, who'd passed away 58 years into a life that deserved twice that length, had believed she was helping others when she enrolled in that trial. She'd talked about it constantly during those final months. How proud she was to contribute. How maybe her participation would save someone else's mother, someone else's wife. The FDA recalled NX774 under regulatory dossier number XB 2019-04471. Noel had continued. They discovered the patient efficacy data was systematically falsified. Toxicity reports were manipulated. Rivera Pharma pushed it through fast-track approval to capture a $2.1 billion market window before competitors could catch up. $2.1 billion. I'd sat there in my hidden office holding the phone against my ear and felt something inside me begin to crystallize. Not rage, not yet. Something colder. Something that calculates before it combusts. The recall records were buried, Noel had said. Intentionally buried in bureaucratic archives where nobody would think to look. It took me 3 years to unearth the paperwork. 3 years of FOIA requests, medical record subpoenas, interviews with former Rivera Pharma employees who were willing to talk off the record. 3 years. While I'd been watching my daughter marry into the family that killed her mother, Noel had been building a case in the shadows. How many people died? I'd asked. My voice had sounded strange to my own ears. Distant. Like it belonged to someone else. Out of 847 enrolled participants, 23 patient fatalities were registered. The Rivera legal team successfully reclassified them as unclear causation, pre-existing conditions, natural disease progression, contributory factors beyond the drug's scope. 23 people, 23 families who'd believed they were participating in legitimate medical research. 23 death certificates that should have listed corporate greed as the cause instead of whatever euphemism the system had provided. 47 seconds. That's how long I'd remained silent after Noel said that. I know because I counted every single one, desperately needing to ensure my voice wouldn't shake when I finally spoke. In those 47 seconds, I watched my entire marriage flash past every morning. Yvonne woke beside me. Every time she called the clinical trial, her chance to help others every moment. She trusted the system that killed her for quarterly profit margins. I retained 3 independent medical experts, Noel had said into my silence. Oncologists with no connection to Rivera Pharma, no financial interest in the outcome. All 3 reviewed Yvonne's medical records. All 3 concluded that NX-774 was the direct primary catalyst in her sudden organ failure. Direct, primary, catalyst, not cancer. Not the disease we'd been fighting together for 18 months. The cure. The cure that wasn't a cure at all, just a profit vehicle wrapped in false hope and fraudulent data. Do I have enough for court? I'd finally asked. Not yet. I don't have 100% material certainty that would survive a motion to dismiss, but I have more than enough probable cause for the FBI to open a federal criminal investigation. Wire fraud, securities, fraud, potentially negligent homicide, depending on how aggressive the prosecutor wants to be. The rain drummed harder against the windows. I opened my eyes and stared at the blue monitors displaying Morgan Horizon Ventures data streams. Numbers scrolling past. Money moving. The machinery of finance operating with perfect indifference to human cost. Do you know what it feels like to discover your wife's death certificate should list corporate greed as cause instead of natural progression? How long did this investigation take you? I'd asked Noel that night. 3 years, 2 months, 11 days, he'd answered immediately. Precise. The way Noel always was. I started the day after Yvonne's funeral when you told me you'd noticed irregularities in the trial documentation. You asked me to look into it quietly, so I did. 3 years, 2 months, 11 days. While I'd been maintaining my cover as the forgotten father, the retired consultant, living in a Queens apartment, Noel had been building a fortress of evidence brick by methodical brick. I need the full dossier, I'd told him. Unredacted. Everything you have. I'll courier it to the secure address. You'll have it by Monday morning. Then I'd said the only thing that mattered. Noel, I need to see you face to face. There are some things that cannot be left to a phone line. Tuesday afternoon, he'd replied. 2 p.m., the usual place. I hung up and sat alone in that hidden office while the city slept around me. The wedding photo was still on my desk, Vivica radiant in white lace, Dashiell handsome in his tuxedo, both of them smiling like the future belonged to them. They had no idea what was coming. Neither did Rivera Pharma. Neither did the system that had let 23 people die for profit and called it unclear causation. By Monday morning, Vivica's world would begin its collapse, and I would be watching every second unfold. I sat before 3 monitors, watching my daughter's company implode in real time. No audio, just the silent choreography of corporate destruction I'd engineered. Monday morning, 9:15. The surveillance cameras Noel had installed at Novatech 3 months prior gave me perfect sightlines into the glass conference room, where Vivica's world was ending. 3 feeds, wide-angle close-up on the table, and a third angled toward the doorway. Novatech's CFO entered first. Philip Reeves, a man in his mid-40s whose pale complexion on the monitor told me everything I needed to know about the numbers he was carrying. He set his laptop on the conference table with the careful movements of someone handling a live explosive. Vivica followed 3 minutes later, phone pressed to her ear designer blazer, perfectly tailored. She ended the call and sat down across from Reeves. No pleasantries, straight to business. 25 years in finance had taught me to read body language with clinical precision. I didn't need audio. The CFO's hands were shaking as he turned his laptop toward her. Vivica leaned forward, eyes scanning the screen. Her posture shifted, shoulders tensed, color draining from her face in real time. The general counsel entered next. Laura Hayes, a sharp woman in her 50s, turned contract pages to clause 12.3 with the efficient movements of someone delivering a death sentence. She pointed to specific paragraphs. Reeves nodded. Vivica's mouth moved questions probably or objections that wouldn't matter. My phone buzzed. Text from Noel. She just dialed Dashiell. Picked up after 5 rings. My tap caught his response. Call my dad. He can handle it. His tone was completely unbothered. Suspiciously so. I read that message twice. Completely unbothered. Not panicked. Not concerned. Like he'd expected this exact scenario to unfold exactly when it did. On the center monitor, Vivica paced the conference room. Phone to her ear again. Calling Wendell, probably. Asking her father-in-law to save the company her biological father was destroying. I cut the video feed. I'd seen enough. I knew Vivica would sign whatever Wendell offered. I needed her to sign it. Every move forward depended on her making exactly that choice. Do you understand what it means to watch your daughter drown while holding the life preserver in your hand? To know that throwing it now would save her company, but destroy your entire plan for justice. I drove to Brooklyn in silence, crossing the bridge while morning traffic crawled around me. The waterfront cafe where I'd told Noel to meet me was the same corner booth we'd used during Morgan Horizon's public years. Worn oak tables, harbor windows, the smell of coffee that had been brewed too strong for too long. Noel had arrived 15 minutes early as always. Back to wall scanning the entrance, positioned so he could see everyone who walked through the door. 32 years of working together and some habits never changed. 4 heavily bound dossiers sat stacked between 2 black coffees already growing cold. No labels on the spines. No markings that would identify what they contained. Just 4 volumes of investigative labor that represented 3 years of Noel's life. 32 years of finance together, Noel said, as I slid into the booth across from him. This is the most important briefing I'll ever give you. Take your time with the pages. I pulled the first dossier toward me and opened it. Medical records. Lab results. FDA correspondence marked confidential. Patient enrollment forms with Yvonne's signature at the bottom, her handwriting. The way she always looped her Y, the slight rightward slant she'd never been able to correct. Noel spoke quietly while I read. Everything I told you on the phone is in these pages, but seeing it in physical form is different. He waited while I absorbed the medical records, the expert witness statements, the FDA correspondence stamped confidential. I reached the victim registry in the 3rd dossier. A simple spreadsheet. 23 names. Line 7, Yvonne Morgan, 58, New York. Seeing her name printed on paper, not heard over a phone line in the dark, made it real in a way the midnight call hadn't. This will stand up in federal court, I asked. Every page, Noel said. That's why it took 3 years. Thank you, I said. Thank you would be premature, he replied. This should have been done sooner. I closed the final dossier and looked down into my cold coffee. The cafe smelled like burnt beans and harbor salt. Morning light sliced through the windows, catching dust motes in the air. Two old partners sitting across from each other with proof of murder stacked between them. The FBI needs 6 weeks minimum to build the criminal case, Noel said. Wire fraud, securities fraud, negligent homicide. Federal prosecutor wants to go RICO if the evidence supports it. 6 weeks. We left the cafe at 12:45. On the drive back across the bridge, I watched Manhattan turn slate gray under worsening June rain. 6 weeks until the FBI could move. I had no intention of sitting idle for 6 weeks. I was going to dismantle the Rivera empire brick by brick, following the exact sequence I'd mapped in my head. And the next brick was waiting in my server room, financial forensics, that would show exactly how deep Vivica had been manipulated into corporate fraud she didn't even know she was committing. The first brick fell at 1:30 p.m. when I executed the forensic trace on the Bugatti's purchase history and discovered my daughter had unknowingly signed her own corporate death warrant. Noel and I sat in the server room running financial queries through databases most people didn't know existed. Over 8 months, $4.7 million had transferred from Novatech's treasury to a shell company called Apex Dynamics, LLC. Clean paperwork, board-approved expenditures, everything documented properly. Then Apex sold 3 of Novatech's core patents to a Singapore entity for $900,000, 15 times below market value. Noel traced the ownership chain. Singapore entity owned by a Cayman Islands trust. Cayman Trust controlled by a Delaware holding company. Delaware Holding ultimately rolled up to Rivera Real Estate Trust. Vivica's signature is on the forming documentation for Apex Dynamics, Noel said, pointing to the scanned corporate resolution. But the corporate resolution assigning the intellectual property was drafted entirely by Rivera Group's general counsel. I stared at my daughter's signature. The same flowing script she'd inherited from her mother. Just like her mother signed the informed consent waiver for the trial without ever knowing Rivera Pharma pulled the strings, I said. Noel looked at me across the monitors. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. 2 generations. 2 women in my family. Both manipulated into signing documents they didn't understand. Both used as instruments in schemes designed by men who viewed human beings as line items. The difference was that Yvonne had died. Vivica still had time. Print everything, I told Noel. Every signature page, every wire transfer, every corporate filing. I left at 3:45 and drove to the elementary school pickup zone. Fixed Monday schedule I'd cleared with Vivica months ago. Pale June sunlight filtered through clouds. Yellow leaves scattered across damp asphalt. Children burst through the double doors at 4 o'clock. My granddaughter May, 3 years old with bright eyes and a little purple backpack, ran from the daycare doors straight into my arms. "Grandpa!" She threw her arms around my waist. "Why did you leave the party so early Friday? I made a surprise for you." How do you tell an 8-year-old that the loving gesture she witnessed her mother giving grandfather, a toy car, is actually a public execution designed to humiliate the man who'd funded her mother's entire empire? "I was tired, sweetheart," I said. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out folded construction paper. "I drew this at school," she said, handing it to me with ceremonial gravity. "My teacher said it was very good." I unfolded the drawing. Crayon on white paper. 2 stick figures standing by blue waves under a yellow sun. The tall one's hand held a tiny red rectangle carefully colored inside the lines. "That's you and me at the beach," May explained. "And that's the car Mommy gave you. I thought you liked cars." The drawing showed a grandfather and granddaughter standing by waves under a yellow sun, and in his hand that tiny red rectangle she'd so carefully colored. She'd made the humiliation beautiful. That's what children do. They transform ugliness into love before they learn better. "It's perfect," I told her, and my voice only shook a little. "Grandpa, why are your eyes red?" she asked. "Just the wind, sweetheart. It's very windy today." I drove her home to Vivica's apartment, watched her run inside with her backpack bouncing, then sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could trust myself to drive. That evening, I sat alone in my Queens apartment kitchen. The modest two-bedroom I'd maintained as cover for 11 years. Cheap laminate counters, fluorescent lights that buzzed. I placed May's crayon drawing on the kitchen table. Beside it, I set the plastic toy car from Friday night. Price tag still attached. $9.99. Two objects side by side. One from a daughter who'd forgotten who I was. The other from a grandchild who'd never stopped remembering. For the first time since Yvonne's funeral, I allowed myself to weep. Not for Vivica. Not for Wendell. Not for the plan I was executing. I wept for my wife who never got the chance to see this drawing. Who would have framed it the way I planned to frame it? Who would have loved that May saw the toy car as a sweet gift instead of the weapon it had been? I wept for the young innocents I was trying to protect from the destruction I was unleashing. May had no idea her mother's company was collapsing. Had no idea her grandfather was the one collapsing it. Had no idea the marriage her mother built was a corporate conspiracy that started 18 months before the wedding. She just knew that Grandpa got a toy car, and she'd drawn a picture to make him smile. I wiped my face, stood up, and opened my laptop. A fresh alert from Noel populated the screen. Technical specifications for the device he'd left on my desk last week. The one that would let me hear exactly what was being said in rooms I couldn't enter. Certain tools demand that you fully understand your own moral limits before you ever pick them up. I read the specifications twice. Transmission range, battery life, audio quality, legal implications under New York's one-party consent statute. Then I read May's art class note at the bottom of her drawing. My favorite person is my grandpa because he always keeps his promises. I folded the drawing carefully and placed it in the drawer beside Yvonne's wedding ring. The toy car stayed on the table. Evidence and memory, weapon and gift. By morning, I would know exactly what Vivica had agreed to sign. By morning, I would hear every word spoken in the emergency board meeting. And by morning, I would understand precisely how deep the manipulation went. Certain promises require you to become someone you never wanted to be. That evening, I sat in my Queens apartment with a cup of tea and pressed play on the audio file Noel had sent at 3 p.m., preparing to hear every word of my daughter's world collapsing in real time. The encrypted file arrived while I'd been reading the surveillance device specifications. Simple text from Noel: conference room intercept. 9:15 a.m. Monday emergency session. You need to hear this. The microphone had been installed 3 months prior, hardwired into Novatech's conference room security system during a routine upgrade. Completely legal under commercial security access protocols. The kind of installation that exists in every corporate office in America, recording meetings for liability protection and executive review. Except this one fed audio directly to Noel's encrypted server. I brewed tea in my small kitchen. Earl Grey, the way Yvonne used to make it. Set the cup on the laminate table beside my laptop, put on headphones, clicked play. This morning I'd watched the meeting through soundproof glass, reading body language and lip movements. Now I would hear the precise words that destroyed her. Static, then the sound of a door opening. Footsteps on carpeted floor. A chair scraping against something. Philip Reeves clearing his throat. Thank you for gathering on short notice. Reeves said, his voice tight with controlled panic. We have a significant liquidity crisis that requires immediate board attention. More chairs. The rustle of papers being distributed. Someone's phone buzzing and being silenced. As of 11:59 p.m. Sunday, our primary investment account, containing $50 million in committed capital, has been frozen by the lead investor. Reeves paused. I heard him take a breath. This action has automatically triggered the cross-default clause in our primary commercial banking agreements, instantly revoking our $23 million revolving credit line. Silence on the recording. Then Vivica's voice, sharp and clear, frozen on what grounds? Material breach of fiduciary duty per clause 12.3 of the original investment agreement, Laura Hayes answered. The general counsel's voice was steady, clinical. The investor issued a notice to cure on Friday at 11:59 p.m. We had 48 hours to respond. The deadline passed Sunday night. I was never notified, Vivica said. Her voice had an edge. I recognized the one she used when she was about to fire someone. Who received this notice? The registered agent, Hayes replied. Me. The notice was legally served per the agreement's notification provisions. I took a sip of tea. It had already gone lukewarm. What's our current cash position? Vivica asked. Reeves's voice dropped. Without the credit line, we cannot process payroll for our 340 employees at month's end. We have 72 hours to secure emergency capital injection, or we face potential insolvency proceedings. Have you ever listened to someone you love, discover they've been betrayed? Not watching their face, just hearing their voice crack and break over speakers, while you sit alone in the dark, knowing you engineered every word they're hearing. Who is this anonymous investor? Vivica demanded. Her voice was rising now, losing the controlled CEO tone. How do they possess the unilateral authority to claw back capital without prior board approval? Paper rustling. Hayes speaking. The original investment agreement. I'm turning to page 47 now. Clause 12.3 grants the lead investor unilateral withdrawal rights upon material breach. The clause defines material breach as, and I quote, conflicts of interest, undisclosed related party transactions, or breach of fiduciary duty materially adverse to investor interests. What breach? Vivica's voice was strained. What are they claiming we did? More paper sounds. Hayes again. The notice cites the Apex Dynamics transaction, the transfer of core intellectual property to a shell company at below market valuation, the subsequent sale to offshore entities. All transactions approved by you as CEO and signed by you personally. I heard my daughter's sharp intake of breath through the headphones. Apex Dynamics was a legitimate restructuring vehicle, Vivica said. But her voice had lost its certainty. The transaction was reviewed by Rivera Group's legal team. They assured me, Rivera Group has no fiduciary duty to Novatech. Hayes interrupted gently. Their legal team represents Rivera interests, not ours. The silence that followed lasted exactly 17 seconds. I know because I counted them the same way I'd counted the seconds after Noelle told me about Yvonne's murder. In those 17 seconds, I heard my daughter's entire world reorganize itself around a truth she'd been too arrogant to see. She'd never been the brilliant CEO, she'd been the mark. Chairs shifted. Someone coughed. The sound of Manhattan traffic filtered through conference room windows in the background. Then Vivica spoke again, and her voice was completely different. Hollowed out. Stripped of the arrogance I'd watched her wear like armor for 2 years. Material breach of fiduciary duty, not a question. A statement of someone who'd finally realized what they'd done. I reached forward and paused the playback. Sat in the absolute silence of my queen's apartment. The tea had gone completely cold. The kitchen light buzzed overhead with that fluorescent hum I'd stopped noticing years ago. My daughter had just discovered that the man she'd humiliated on Friday night, the man she'd thrown a toy car at in front of 200 witnesses, was the anonymous investor who'd funded her entire empire. And now that same man was pulling the foundation out from under her feet. She didn't know it was me. Not yet. She just knew she was drowning. I knew Vivica would call Wendell. I needed her to call him. Every move forward depended on her reaching for exactly the wrong life preserver. The audio file had 3 more minutes remaining. I could see the timestamp: Vivica walking out of the Novatech building at 11:30 a.m. Noel's tap, catching her panicked phone call to Dashiell. The sound of her heels clicking on marble. Car door slamming, engine starting, but I didn't need to hear it. I already knew where her feet were taking her. I knew she'd drive straight to Wendell's office in Midtown. I knew she'd walk into that meeting, desperate, grateful, ready to sign anything he put in front of her. And I knew the meeting she was walking into would not save her, not in the way she imagined. Wendell Rivera was about to offer her exactly what drowning people always reach for, an anchor disguised as a life preserver. That evening, I sat in the absolute dark of my Queens apartment and listened to Wendell Rivera offer my daughter exactly what drowning people always reach for, an anchor disguised as a life preserver. Noel's second audio file arrived at 6 p.m. Subject line: Rivera Group Office, 2 p.m. Monday. Device in executive suite. I turned off every light in the apartment. Sat in complete darkness with my headphones on. Pressed play. The recording quality was different this time. Richer sound, less ambient noise. Wendell's office was 40 floors up, insulated from street traffic by wealth and elevation. Outdoor opening. Vivica's voice strained. Wendell, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I need to explain what's happening at Novatech. I'm aware of what's happening, Wendell interrupted. His voice was flat, clinical. The tone of a surgeon explaining a terminal diagnosis. Your CFO briefed me this morning. Sit down. Chairs. The rustle of expensive leather. Papers being moved across a desk. The situation is quite simple, Wendell continued. Your company is insolvent. The anonymous investor who funded your Series A has triggered a material breach clause and frozen your capital account. Your credit lines are revoked. You cannot make payroll. You have 72 hours before your employees discover they're working for a company that no longer exists. Silence. Then Vivica, her voice smaller. I need help. The Rivera Group will inject $60 million in emergency liquidity, Wendell said. No warmth. No fatherly concern. Just numbers. In exchange for an absolute 51% controlling equity stake in Novatech Solutions and immediate transfer of all intellectual property into a wholly owned subsidiary of the Rivera Group. More silence. I could hear Vivica breathing through the recording. That's a hostile takeover, she finally managed. That's a rescue, Wendell corrected. This is the single best valuation you will receive within the next 72 hours. In fact, it's the only valuation you will receive. No institutional investor will touch a company in active material breach proceedings. Papers rustling. Wendell again. The documents are prepared. Sign by tomorrow morning, and the capital transfer executes by end of business. Your employees get paid. Your company survives. Wendell was offering my daughter a rescue rope, but rescue ropes don't come with nooses pre-tied at the end, unless someone wants you to slip your own head through before you realize what you're holding. I need to review these with my attorney, Vivica said. Your attorney will tell you exactly what I'm telling you now, Wendell replied. Sign or file for bankruptcy. Those are your options. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. The recording ended with a door closing. I sat in the darkness and knew three things with absolute certainty Vivica would sign. I needed her to sign. And that signature would place my daughter directly in the line of fire for criminal conspiracy charges. I stopped the playback and sat motionless for 10 minutes. The next morning at 10 a.m. I initiated a secure encrypted video conference with Noel from my Midtown terminal. His face appeared on the screen calling in from his Brooklyn satellite office. Did she sign? I asked. 8:57 a.m., Noel confirmed. 3 minutes before deadline. The capital transfer is processing now. I nodded. It was done. Vivica had traded majority control of her company for $60 million and 90 days of runway. She thought she'd been rescued. She had no idea she'd just signed herself into a federal conspiracy case. There's something else, Noel said. His expression shifted slightly. The look he got when he'd been sitting on information he knew would change the game. Something you need to understand about the operational landscape. Tell me. 2 years ago, Dashiell Rivera retained a private intelligence firm called Pacific Insight to track your movements, financials, and social contacts. Noel began. Standard due diligence for a family bringing someone new into their circle through marriage. They wanted to know who Vivica's father really was. I felt my jaw tighten, and Noel smiled faintly. Pacific Insight is a corporate front I established 4 years ago specifically to intercept operations of exactly this nature. Every single investigative report delivered to Dashiell and Wendell over the past 2 years was a highly curated, fabricated narrative I wrote myself. I stared at the screen. Every report, Noel confirmed. They believe you're a broken old man surviving on $180,000 in liquid savings and a $350,000 Queens apartment. They have zero knowledge Morgan Horizon Ventures exists. No idea this Midtown server room exists. No clue what I actually do for a living. Imagine playing chess against someone for 2 years. Carefully studying their position, planning your moves, never realizing your opponent controls which pieces you're allowed to see on your own side of the board. Weekly status reports, I asked. Friday afternoons like clockwork, Noel said. Last week's dossier stated you returned home at 11 p.m. Friday after the gala and remained inside all weekend. Depressed, isolated, no unusual activity. I let that sink in. The Rivera family had operated for 2 full years, believing they possessed comprehensive intelligence on me, never realizing every single data point was fiction. Noel fed them through a front company they'd hired themselves. They thought they'd been watching me. They'd been watching a ghost. Keep the narrative intact, I said. I need them confident in their information superiority. Already handled, Noel replied. This week's report will note you picked up your granddaughter from school Monday, standard routine, no deviations from baseline behavior. I disconnected the video call and sat alone in the server room, staring at the Morgan Horizon dashboard. $340 million in assets under management. 23 active portfolio investments. A venture capital empire. The Rivera family had no idea existed because Noel had spent 2 years telling them I was exactly what I appeared to be, nobody. Wendell thought he was playing chess. He had no idea Noel controlled which pieces appeared on his side of the board. 6 weeks until the FBI could move felt like a lifetime. But I had no intention of waiting 6 weeks. The next piece had to be deployed before the week ended. It was time to bring the Fourth Estate into the game, and I knew exactly which journalist's investigative instincts were about to receive the tip of her career. For the first time in 30 years of controlling markets, I was about to place my wife's justice in the hands of a stranger whose integrity I could only hope existed. Friday morning, June 20th, I sat at the air-gapped terminal in my secure office and opened an encrypted text editor. No internet connection, no network trace, just me and a message that would either ignite an investigation or disappear into a journalist's spam folder. Vesper Gonzalez, 38, and known throughout financial journalism circles as relentless, would receive the encrypted package within hours, and I could only hope her reputation was deserved. I'd researched her thoroughly. Wall Street Journal Financial Crimes beat 3 exposés in the last 5 years that had triggered SEC investigations. She had a reputation for verification over sensation, for following paper trails instead of chasing headlines. Exactly the kind of journalist who might look at an anonymous tip and do the work instead of dismissing it. I composed the message with surgical precision. I am an anonymous source. I do not ask you to believe me blindly. I ask you to verify the trail independently. Attached are 3 documents. First, a beneficial ownership chart linking Rivera Real Estate Trust to Apex Dynamics LLC through shell companies in Singapore and the Cayman Islands. Second, corporate summary of NX774 clinical trials conducted by Rivera Pharma with FDA FOIA dossier reference number XB 2019-4471. Third, complete list of 23 deceased trial participants. The FOIA file contains all the answers. I trust you to find them. I attached the 3 files. Reviewed the text 3 times. Too much information would expose my position. Too little would be dismissed as conspiracy theory. The line between credibility and revelation is thinner than most people realize. The beneficial ownership chart showed the trail I'd traced with Noel, how Vivica's corporate fraud linked directly back to Rivera Group. The clinical trial summary provided enough detail to intrigue without revealing everything Noel had spent 3 years uncovering. And the patient list, 23 names, line 7, Yvonne Morgan, 58, New York. My wife's name on a document I was sending to a stranger. I executed the encrypted transmission at 9:47 a.m. Hit send. Watched the confirmation message appear. The file was gone, traveling through anonymous relay servers to an encrypted inbox at the Wall Street Journal. Then I sat back from the terminal and realized something deeply uncomfortable. I had no way of knowing if she would open the file. I didn't know if she would pursue the lead. I couldn't force her hand. This was the most uncomfortable position I'd occupied in 3 decades. Complete dependence on the integrity and curiosity of someone I'd never met, whose motivations I could only guess at. What happens when a man who's spent 30 years controlling every market variable suddenly places his wife's justice in the hands of a stranger's professional ethics? You learn whether you built your plan on strategy or on hubris. I poured black coffee and tried to focus on other work. Morgan Horizon needed attention. Portfolio companies required oversight. I ran financial models, reviewed quarterly reports, executed routine capital allocations. But my mind kept returning to that encrypted file sitting in Vesper Gonzalez's inbox. Would she open it before lunch? Would she delete it as another crank tip? Would she forward it to her editor or pursue it quietly first? I had controlled markets for 30 years by eliminating variables, by knowing outcomes before they occurred, by never depending on factors I couldn't influence. And now I was waiting. Waiting is what people who lack control do. I'd forgotten how it felt. The hours crawled past. 10 a.m., 11, noon. I ate lunch at my desk without tasting it, ran more models, reviewed more reports, checked my secure phone 17 times for messages from Noel. Nothing. 1 p.m. 2. 3. The afternoon stretched into something elastic and torturous. I considered calling Noel, asking if he'd detected any activity, but I knew better. Either Vesper would bite or she wouldn't. Pressure wouldn't change the outcome. At 4 p.m. my secure phone buzzed. Text from Noel: someone just submitted an expedited FOIA request to the FDA for file number XB 2019-4471. I felt my pulse quicken. Read the message twice to make sure I understood it correctly. She took the bait. I typed back, "How long until production?" Noel's response came immediately. "On a priority track, 20 business days." I pulled up the calendar on my terminal. June 20th plus 20 business days. Mid-July. In 20 days, comprehensive FDA documentation proving Rivera Pharma's fraud would be in the hands of the Wall Street Journal's most tenacious investigative reporter. I thought about the patient list I'd attached to that transmission. 23 names, line 7, Yvonne Morgan, 58, New York. In 20 business days, my wife's name would appear in the Wall Street Journal. Finally visible. Finally mattering to someone beyond me. I allowed myself a brief smile. The first genuine one since Friday night at the gala. Vesper Gonzalez had opened the encrypted file. She'd read the documents. She'd done exactly what I'd hoped. She'd gone straight to the source. Not calling the Rivera Group for comment. Not publishing speculation. Filing an FOIA request to independently verify every claim I'd made. Professional curiosity had answered. The Fourth Estate was now in the game, and they had no idea who'd invited them. I texted Noel back, "Keep monitoring. I want to know the moment that file gets produced." "Already set up," he replied. "I have alerts on the FDA's FOIA production queue. When it releases, you'll know within the hour." I set down my phone and stared at the Morgan Horizon terminal. $340 million in assets. 23 active investments. A venture capital empire built over 3 decades. And in 20 business days, none of it would matter as much as what Vesper Gonzalez chose to do with the information I'd handed her. 20 business days until the FDA file dropped. But I had other pieces to deploy before then. That afternoon, I needed to handle something deeply personal, something that had nothing to do with strategy, and everything to do with the promise I'd made to Yvonne the day we ordered that Bugatti. The vehicle Wendell stole wasn't just a car. It was the last gift I'd chosen for the woman Rivera Pharma murdered, and I was about to go see it with my own eyes. The navy blue Bugatti sat in parking stall 1 license plate, NYP3047. The exact vehicle I'd ordered 15 months ago for the woman Rivera Pharma murdered 3 weeks before I could give it to her. Afternoon, June 21st. I'd redirected my route through the subterranean parking beneath Rivera Group headquarters. Level B2 executive enclave accessed by keycard I'd cloned through Noel's network months ago. The garage was quiet. Concrete pillars. Fluorescent lights. The smell of motor oil and money. And there it sat. Navy blue. Flawless. $3 million of Italian engineering that should have been parked in my driveway with a ribbon on the hood. March 2024. I'd custom ordered this exact vehicle, reserved this specific plate, NYP3047, intending to present it to Yvonne for our 30th anniversary in June. She'd always wanted one. Not for speed or status. She just loved the engineering, the precision, the way Italian designers could make metal move like water. She passed in April. I canceled the order on April 23rd, 7 days after her funeral. The dealership manager asked if I wanted to transfer the reservation to a different model, maybe something less painful to look at. I told him no. Some gifts aren't meant for anyone else. The allocation went back to market. And somehow, through auctions or private sales or the kind of deals that happen in rooms I'll never see, it ended up here. In Wendell Rivera's parking space. The man whose pharmaceutical company killed my wife now owned the car I'd ordered for her memory. I stood beside the vehicle for 4 minutes. Didn't touch it. Just looked. The license plate was mine. The color was mine. Even the interior I could see through the window was the exact champagne leather Yvonne had circled in the configurator brochure. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the license plate. Then I called Noel. "Find the complete purchase and auction history of this vehicle allocation from the Midtown dealership," I said when he answered. "To what end?" Noel asked. "Because before this story ends, that car will belong to me. Not because I wanted the car, but because that machine belongs exactly where she intended it to be. In my garage, where I could look at it and remember what they took from me." "I'll have the full chain of title by tomorrow," Noel said. I hung up and walked back to my own car. A 15-year-old sedan that cost less than the Bugatti's tire package. The contrast wasn't lost on me. That evening, back at my secure office, I pulled up corridor surveillance footage from June 19th, the morning Vivica had signed Wendell's documents. I'd watched it live through the video feeds that morning, but I needed to see it again, and needed to understand exactly what I'd allowed to happen. The timestamp read 9:03 a.m. Vivica walked into Rivera Group's legal suite alone. No independent counsel, no advisors. I'd advised her weeks ago casually during a phone call about May's school schedule to retain outside representation for any major corporate decisions. But I hadn't called to stop this. Not yet. She disappeared into the conference room. The corridor camera showed an empty hallway for 45 minutes. Just white carpet and closed doors, and the occasional associate walking past with coffee. Then the conference room door opened. Vivica emerged holding a bound corporate ledger, ink still fresh. Gregory Thornton, the lead partner at Rivera Group's legal team, a man in his 60s, whose subtle nod to Dashiell sealed the conspiracy, before Vivica reached the elevator, walked her to the exit, with the practiced courtesy of someone executing a contract killing. I replayed the next 10 seconds 3 times. Vivica turned her back to walk toward the elevator. In that exact moment, Dashiell, who'd been standing near the conference room entrance, looked directly at Thornton and gave a subtle, slow nod. It lasted less than a second, a fraction of a beat. Vivica missed it completely, but the camera didn't. That nod meant one thing: the trap was set. The signature was obtained. Vivica Morgan Rivera had just legally bound herself to a fraudulent conspiracy trail that led directly to Rivera Group's criminal enterprise. Do you know what it means to protect your daughter by letting her sign documents that could destroy her life? To watch her trap herself legally because the signature is the only way to prove the conspiracy while you've already built her escape route 3 weeks in advance. I watched the elevator doors close on the monitor. Vivica stood alone inside, clutching that ledger like it was a lifeline instead of an anchor. She had no idea that signature placed her directly in the line of fire for federal conspiracy charges. She thought she'd just saved her company, but she also didn't know I'd already built her defense. I picked up my secure phone and dialed Otis Ward. "Is our cross-motion to vacate finalized?" I asked when he answered. "It's been sitting in my safe for 3 weeks," Otis replied. His voice was steady, professional, the tone of a man who'd executed this kind of strategy before. "Legal grounds: duress material non-disclosure, breach of the implied covenant of good faith," Otis said. "More than enough statutory grounds to void the transfers under New York corporate law. When you give me the word, I can have it filed within the hour." "Not yet," I said. "The signature needs to exist long enough to establish pattern. But I want you ready to move the moment I call." "Understood." I hung up and stared at the frozen frame on my monitor. Vivica in the elevator, alone, holding that ledger. I'd protected my daughter before the trap ever sprung. That's the difference between strategy and scrambling, between chess and panic. 3 weeks ago, while Vivica was still celebrating her CEO position, I'd instructed Otis to prepare comprehensive legal motions, invalidating any agreements she might sign with Rivera Group. Grounds: duress, resulting from the capital freeze I'd engineered. Material non-disclosure of Rivera's fraudulent intent. Breach of good faith in negotiations conducted under time pressure I'd created. The trap was necessary. It established criminal conspiracy. It created evidence chains the FBI could follow. It proved intent. But I'd made damn sure my daughter had an exit before I let her walk into the room. The monitor showed the empty corridor again. White carpet. Closed doors. The elevator had carried Vivica away to whatever came next. I adjusted my coat and stood up from the terminal. Next phase, we present everything to the Bureau. 26 Federal Plaza was waiting, and the FBI had been building their own case against Rivera Group for 14 months. I was about to hand them the missing links they needed for indictments and a comprehensive Title III surveillance warrant. By the time the week ended, the Rivera family would be under federal microscope, and they'd never see it coming. The federal agent across the mahogany table slid a manila folder toward me. 14 months of surveillance photographs, and my daughter's face appeared in 47 of them. 26 Federal Plaza, the building where financial empires came to die. I carried 43 pounds of evidence in 3 aluminum cases, enough to bury the man who'd stolen my daughter. Noel and Otis walked beside me through multi-stage security, metal detectors, biometric scanners, visitor badges with RFID chips that tracked our every movement through fluorescent-lit corridors with soundproofing panels. A security officer checked our credentials for the 3rd time. "Mr. Morgan, all electronic devices remain here." Your attorney and consultant have been cleared for skiff access. Follow me. We rode the elevator to the 23rd floor. The doors opened into a hallway that smelled like industrial coffee and the chemical clean scent of government facilities. At the end, a conference room with a reinforced steel door. Skiff, the kind of room where secrets went to be cataloged and weaponized. Inside, 2 FBI agents waited at a mahogany table. Digital presentation screens lined one wall. Evidence boxes stacked in the corner. Special Agent Marcus Holloway, mid-50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that calculated risk, the way actuaries calculated premiums, stood to shake my hand. 23 years with the Bureau's Financial Crimes Unit, according to the brief Noel had compiled. Mr. Morgan, thank you for coming in. His grip was firm, professional. This is Special Agent Diana Ortega, our white-collar crime specialist. Ortega, early 40s and a former SEC prosecutor with a reputation for building airtight RICO cases, nodded from across the table. We've been looking forward to this conversation. I set the aluminum cases on the table, opened them. 3 years of investigation spread across government-issue furniture. On November 12, 2023, Rivera Group filed FDA applications for Novatech's proprietary biotech coating. I began. 15 days before my daughter discovered the IP theft. The regulatory timeline proves premeditation. I walked them through it systematically. The Apex Dynamics shell company, the Singapore transfers, the beneficial ownership chain leading back to Rivera Real Estate Trust. Every document numbered, every transaction dated, every wire transfer tracked. Noel handled the digital forensics. These metadata signatures show document alteration at 3:47 a.m. on December 8th. Pacific Insight's secured server farm in San Jose. We have the digital fingerprints. Ortega leaned forward. Mr. Morgan, this corroborates our Title 18 predicate offenses. The equity manipulation you're describing, walk me through the December transaction structure. Otis provided the legal framework. The dilution mechanics meet RICO Act requirements. Pattern of racketeering activity across 3 separate criminal statutes. We're looking at wire fraud exceeding $500 million in aggregate transfers. Agent Ortega's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, then stood. Excuse me, U.S. Attorney needs confirmation on something. The door sealed behind her with a pneumatic hiss. In the silence, I noticed Noel's hand trembling slightly as he cued the next forensic exhibit. 43 pounds of evidence, and we were only halfway through. 90 minutes into the presentation, Holloway held up a hand. Mr. Morgan, I need to show you something. He slid the manila folder across the table. I opened it. Surveillance photographs. My daughter at restaurants. At Novatech offices. At her wedding. 47 in images spanning 14 months. We've been building a racketeering case against Rivera Group since April 2023, Holloway said. 14 months of surveillance, financial analysis, cooperating witnesses. Your evidence completes the chain. 14 months. The FBI had been watching while Vivica married into the empire. While I'd been building my case and secret federal agents had been building theirs. Your FDA documentation and IP theft proof, these are the missing predicate offenses we needed for RICO charges, Ortega said, returning to her seat. We can move to indictment phase. Holloway opened his own folder. We're authorizing a Title III comprehensive surveillance warrant on Rivera Group communications. 6 weeks of additional intercepts, then coordinated arrests. Federal State SEC simultaneous action, Otis spoke up. Title III resolves the surveillance admissibility issues. Everything you've gathered, it's now part of a federal prosecution framework. Through the reinforced window, I could see Lower Manhattan stretching toward the harbor, the city where I'd built a venture capital empire, where I'd lost everything, where federal agents had been photographing my daughter for 14 months, while I'd thought I was alone in this war. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. 6 weeks, I said. What happens to my daughter during those 6 weeks? She's a potential witness, not a target, Holloway replied. We protect witnesses, Mr. Morgan. Rivera won't see this coming. We spent another hour coordinating. Evidence handoff protocols, secure communication channels, the mechanics of transforming 3 years of private investigation into federal prosecution. When we finished, Holloway walked me to the elevator. Mr. Morgan, one thing your daughter doesn't know, you've been investigating her husband. I shook my head. Good. Keep it that way for 6 more weeks. The moment she knows, her behavior changes. Wendell will notice. The elevator descended 23 floors. Noel and Otis rode down in silence beside me. When we reached street-level Manhattan, afternoon light hit my face like a physical thing. I pulled out my phone. One text message received 11 minutes ago. From Vivica. Dad, can we talk? Something's wrong with the marriage. I need your advice. I stared at the message. Read it twice. The FBI wanted 6 weeks of operational security. 6 weeks of silence while they built their case. 6 weeks of watching my daughter discover her marriage was a lie without being able to tell her I already knew. 6 weeks of silence or tell her everything now. Noel looked at my face. Problem. I showed him the screen. The Bureau's timeline just collided with your daughter's, he said quietly. I stood on the steps of 26 Federal Plaza holding my phone. The city moved around me, taxis, honking pedestrians rushing past, the machinery of Manhattan, indifferent to the choice I had to make in the next 60 seconds. Reply now or stay silent. Protect the operation or protect my daughter. I looked at the message one more time. Then I made my choice. My daughter's wedding ring caught the candlelight. Wrong 3-carat emerald-cut diamond that cost Wendell nothing because he'd billed it to her own company. I'd replied to her text within 2 minutes of leaving Federal Plaza. Not with answers. Just with an invitation. Gianelli's, 7:30. I'll be at the usual table. The trattoria where we'd celebrated her college graduation. Where I'd toasted her first CEO position. Where we hadn't sat together in 2 years. July 4th, 7:30 p.m. I arrived early and chose the corner booth. Candlelight and red tablecloth, the smell of garlic and basil, and 30 years of family memories baked into the walls. Angela Moretti, the longtime waitress who'd served us since Vivica was in high school, appeared with menus and a knowing smile that held 2 decades of Morgan family history. Mr. Morgan, the usual corner table. It's been too long since you both were here. Too long, I agreed. Vivica arrived at 7:35. I watched her walk through the door, designer blazer, perfect posture, the armor of someone who'd learned to dress for boardrooms. But underneath it, I could see the strain. Shadows under her eyes. Weight loss in her face. Professional exhaustion wrapped in expensive clothes. She slid into the booth across from me. That 3-carat diamond caught the light again, and I thought about the invoice Noel had found 3 months ago. Rivera Group corporate account. Line item engagement ring. Charged to Novatech marketing budget under executive appearance consulting. Dad, she said. Her voice was smaller than I'd heard it in years. Thank you for meeting me. Of course. She picked up the menu without looking at it. Set it down. Picked up her water glass. I think I made a mistake. The marriage, something's wrong and I can't figure out what. She was 2 revelations away from discovering everything I already knew. I had to guide without revealing. Tell me what's wrong, I said. Angela brought bread and olive oil. Disappeared with professional discretion. Vivica tore a piece of focaccia into smaller pieces without eating any of it. Wendell's been different lately, she said. Late-night phone calls he takes in other rooms. When I ask about Rivera Group finances, things that affect my company, he says it's not my concern. He wants me to sign proxy voting rights over to him. Says it's standard for married executives. Did Otis mention that when he reviewed your prenup? I asked, knowing exactly what Otis had told her. No. Otis specifically said to maintain independent voting authority. She finally looked up at me. Dad, do you think he married me for Novatech? Sometimes I feel like I'm just an acquisition. Her instincts were catching up to reality. 14 months too late, but they were catching up. Trust your instincts, I said carefully. If something feels wrong, get independent counsel before signing anything. Independent counsel, she repeated. Like I don't trust my own husband. Like you're protecting yourself. She'd lost 11 pounds since the wedding. I knew because Noel's surveillance photos tracked everything, and I hated myself for knowing. We ordered dinner. Conversation drifted to safer territory. May's school. Vivica's work. The kind of small talk that filled space between people who'd forgotten how to be honest with each other. But underneath it, I could feel her circling back to the real question. The one she couldn't quite ask. Dessert arrived. Tiramisu we'd shared 100 times before. Vivica pushed it around her plate. I keep thinking about the gala, she said quietly. The way the toy car. Dad, I'm so sorry. That was cruel. I'd been waiting for this. It's forgotten. It's not forgotten. Her eyes were wet. I said terrible things. I humiliated you in front of 200 people because I was trying to impress Wendell's father. Trying to prove I belonged in their world. And now I'm not sure I want to belong in their world. I reached into the bag I'd brought. Pulled out a small wrapped box. I found this in storage last week. Thought you might want it. She unwrapped it slowly. Lifted the lid. Inside the red plastic toy car. The same one she'd thrown at me 6 weeks ago. But different. Cleaned. Restored. The price tag removed. Sitting in tissue paper like it mattered. You kept it, she whispered. I remember this. You used to race it across my desk during board meetings. Thought you could use a reminder that you've always been unstoppable. Vivica picked up the car. Turned it over in her hands. You told me once it was worth more than any Bugatti because I chose it myself. Still true. She was crying now. Not the controlled tears of someone maintaining composure. Real crying. The kind that came from recognizing you'd hurt someone who never stopped loving you. I'll keep it at the office, she said. Right where I can see it. Right where I need to remember who I am. The toy car sat between us like a Trojan horse at a peace treaty, red plastic hiding federal technology, covering tactical deployment. 43 grams. FBI-grade micro recorder embedded in the chassis. 72-hour battery life. Voice-activated recording that would capture every conversation within 20 feet. New York's one-party consent statute made it perfectly legal she was the party consenting, even if she didn't know what she was consenting to. She'd carry my surveillance into the heart of Rivera's empire, and the law would protect every word we captured. Thank you, Dad, she said, sliding the car into her Hermes bag. For dinner. For this. For not giving up on me when I gave you every reason to. We left Gianelli's at 8:45. I walked her to her car. Hugged her goodbye. Watched her drive away with federal evidence sitting in her purse like a childhood memory. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Text from Noel, device active. Signal strong. First intercept captured. I was in my car 3 blocks away. I opened the encrypted app, put in my headphones, pressed play. Vivica's voice shaking. I finally told him. I told my father the truth about the marriage. About how I'm starting to see what Wendell really is. Then a second voice on the line, and my blood went cold. I played the recording 17 times before accepting what my ears were telling me. The second voice wasn't some Rivera associate or Wall Street conspirator. It was Philip Reeves, 42, Novatech's CFO, the numbers wizard Vivica had hired 3 years ago and trusted with every financial decision. My daughter was confiding her wedding doubts to her chief financial officer at 11:30 at night. I just need to know the timing works, she'd said on that first intercept, before I commit to anything permanent. The way she emphasized timing sent professional alarm bells screaming. 2 days later, July 9th, I sat in the FBI's Lower Manhattan field office conference room with Special Agent Marcus Holloway and his technical surveillance coordinator. The walls were soundproofed gray, the air conditioning aggressive enough to raise goosebumps. Title III warrants came through at 0620 this morning, Holloway said, sliding a manila folder across the table. We have eyes and ears in the Rivera penthouse as of yesterday afternoon. I opened the folder. Surveillance photos showed Dashiell Rivera, a younger associate I didn't recognize, and an older man gathered around a dining table. The timestamp read July 7, 2024, 2047. The older gentleman is Francisco Ibarra, 67, the family's outside legal counsel, Holloway continued. Specializes in offshore asset protection. He flew in from Grand Cayman Tuesday morning. She pressed play on the audio equipment. Through the speakers came Dashiell's voice, crisp and businesslike. Novatech liquidation needs to happen before the wedding. We move the assets through the Bahamas structure convert to bearer instruments, and Vivica's company becomes the vehicle. She won't see it coming until it's done. The younger man's response was cautious. And if she discovers the Morgan connection, she won't, Dashiell said. The encryption is military grade. By the time anyone breaks it, we'll be 3 countries away. Holloway stopped the playback. They're planning to use your daughter's company as a money laundering vehicle. The wedding is their timeline. My hands went cold. She doesn't know. We believe she's an unwitting participant, Holloway said carefully. But we need to be certain. Your intercepts from the toy car device any mention of financial irregularities. She's talking about timing, I said slowly, and asking her CFO about commitment. Holloway's expression shifted. We need those recordings. All of them. I didn't hear from Vivica for 3 weeks. No calls, no Sunday brunches, nothing but silence that felt deliberately maintained. Then on August 5th, my phone lit up at 9:47 p.m. Her name on the screen. I answered on the first ring. Vivi, who are you? Her voice was barely controlled fury wrapped around something that sounded like betrayal. Who are you really? My mouth went dry. What are you talking about? I found them. The encrypted files Marcus had buried in our investor records. Blackstone Capital Partners, $50 million. Founding investment, January 2019. Each word was a surgical strike. Managed by Thurston Morgan, Wall Street legend. Disappeared 2008. The man they called the Prophet of Black Monday. The room tilted. 17 years of constructed anonymity, of carefully managed obscurity shredding in real time. You funded my entire company. She continued, her voice shaking now. Every success I thought I'd earned, every milestone, every victory. It was all your money. You've been pulling strings the entire time. That's not true, I said, forcing a steadiness I didn't feel. I invested because I believed in your vision. The success is yours, Vivi. Every bit of it. Don't call me that. Ice cold now. You don't get to use pet names when you've been lying to me for 7 years. Since before I even started the company. How long have you been watching? How long have you been playing puppet master with my life? I've never controlled anything. I said, my own anger rising to match hers. I gave you capital and got out of the way. Everything you built yourself, through a shell corporation, using a fake identity, while pretending to be just my struggling accountant father who could barely make rent. Bitter laugh. What was my role in all this? Was I just another investment vehicle? Another asset to manage? Silence stretched between us. 11 seconds by my watch, each one a chasm widening. Answer me, she whispered. You were never an asset, I said quietly. You're my daughter. Everything I did was to protect you from a world that would have used my name against you, against us both. I don't believe you. Her voice broke on the last word. I don't even know what's real anymore. The line went dead. I stood there holding the silent phone, my carefully constructed world collapsing around me in real time. 17 years of protection, of sacrifice, of maintaining distance to keep her safe, and she thought I'd been manipulating her, using her. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. A single photo, Vivica's office taken from inside. Her desk visible, her coffee mug, the award she'd won last year for innovation in biotech. The message below read, "She knows now, we should talk about what happens next." Before I could process that, my phone rang again. Vivica's assistant, breathless. "Mr. Morgan, Ms. Morgan, Miss Morgan Rivera asked me to call you." Dashiell Rivera just walked into her office unannounced. She looked frightened. I heard him say something about, "This changes absolutely everything about our timeline," before she asked me to step out. My blood turned to ice. "Call the police, right now." I was already running for the door. I burst through Novatech's glass doors at 10:14 p.m., breathless, and found the lobby empty. The night security guard looked up from his desk, confused. "Where's my daughter, Vivica Morgan Rivera, 18th floor?" "She left 20 minutes ago, sir, with Mr. Rivera. They walked out together." My phone buzzed. Text from Vivica. "We talked. I'm fine. Don't call tonight. I need time." She called back the next afternoon at 3:52 p.m. 26 years, Dad. Her voice was controlled fury wrapped in exhausted confusion. "You let me think you were just a retired consultant who could barely pay rent. You watched me beg investors for credibility work, 80-hour weeks, proving myself, and you were Thurston Morgan the entire time. The prophet of Black Monday. The man who predicted the '87 crash. Why?" I sat in my Tribeca office, staring at the Hudson through floor-to-ceiling windows, tasting copper in my mouth. "Your mother made me promise." "What?" Her last words. February 16th, 2013, 4:47 a.m. Mount Sinai Hospital Room 714. The details were carved into my memory like scars. She said, "Let her become someone without your name attached. Let her prove she's extraordinary without the Morgan legacy writing checks." I kept that promise. Silence stretched for 17 seconds. "So you hid who you were to honor Mom's memory." Vivica's voice cracked. "And you funded my company anonymously to keep me afloat while watching me struggle. Dad, I don't know whether to thank you or hate you right now. I never wanted you to feel like your success wasn't yours," I said quietly. "Every decision you made, every milestone you hit, that was you. The capital was just $50 million I didn't know came from my supposedly broke father." Bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea what this does? Every achievement, every award, every investor who believed in me, was it real or was it your money smoothing the path?" "It was real, all of it." "How do I know that?" she whispered. "How do I know what's real anymore?" My wife died asking me to lie to our daughter for the rest of my life. And I'd kept that promise for 11 years, and now it was destroying us both. "Meet me tomorrow," I said. 10 a.m., my office. "There's more you need to know. About Wendell, about the marriage, about what's really happening at Rivera Group. I'll tell you everything." "Everything," skeptical edge. "Everything," she exhaled slowly. "Fine. Tomorrow, 10. But Dad, no more secrets. I mean it." The line went dead. I immediately called Otis. He answered on the second ring. "You're disclosing the FBI investigation to a potential witness. Tell me Holloway signed off on this." "Rivera's accelerating their timeline," I said. "If my daughter's becoming collateral damage, she married into the target family. She's not collateral, she's leverage. You brief her, you compromise operational security. Then get Holloway on the line." 10 minutes later, Special Agent Marcus Holloway's gravelly voice came through speaker. "Rivera's moving faster than we projected. If the daughter discovers the fraud independently, and confronts Wendell, she becomes a liability to their operation. Brief her, but keep it controlled. No documentation, no recordings. Verbal only. Understood, I said. And Morgan, she doesn't leave that room until we're certain she won't tip Wendell that we're watching. I spent the next 6 hours preparing what I'd say, how I'd explain 17 years of surveillance, federal conspiracy, charges, the toy car recorder, Title 3. Intercepts. How do you tell your daughter her marriage is an FBI investigation? Before I reveal what that midnight intercept exposed, the prenup clause designed to destroy Vivica, tell me, A. Wendell planned this from the wedding, or B. He's improvising, now she knows the truth. Comment A or B with one reason, 5 to 10 words. Please note what follows contains recreated details for narrative impact. The lesson is what matters. Here's what I heard at 11. The FBI surveillance feed came through crystal clear. Audio only, Rivera Executive Suite. Wendell's voice carried clinical precision. Prenup Section 14C Fraud Discovery Clause. We retroactively void the marital property agreement, seize all assets acquired during marriage, leave her holding the corporate debt. 89 million in Novatech liabilities transfers to her personal guarantee. Dashiell's voice carried satisfied edge. She signed that document December 15th. We made sure the language was buried in the employment paperwork. She takes the fall for IP theft. We keep the patents. Timeline, Wendell asked. File emergency motion tomorrow morning. Family Court Judge Patricia Brennan, 56, known for fast rulings on financial fraud cases, former corporate litigator. Hearing August 7th, 9 a.m. We present the discovery, her father's secret Wall Street identity, the $50 million in hidden funding, the conflict of interest. Makes her look complicit in corporate fraud. And she loses everything, Wendell said flatly. Everything, Dashiell confirmed. Novatech equity, personal assets, reputation. She'll be facing criminal exposure while we walk clean with the patents and the offshore transfers already completed. Section 14C, 3 paragraphs buried in a 70-page prenuptial agreement. Legal land mine activated on command. They were going to destroy her financially, frame her criminally, and walk away with everything she'd built. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on August 7th, 36 hours from now. My phone buzzed. Noel Long, emergency motion just filed in family court. Wendell Rivera vs. Vivica Morgan Rivera, prenup enforcement hearing, fraud allegations. Judge Brennan assigned. Hearing 8:09 a.m. We have 36 hours to counter. I stared at the intercept transcript until 2 a.m., watching Wendell's strategy crystallize into legal devastation. Tomorrow at 10, I'd tell Vivica everything. The surveillance, the FBI, the evidence we'd been gathering for months. But we wouldn't just be preparing for disclosure. We'd be racing against a courtroom ambush designed to strip her of everything while making her the criminal. And I had no idea if 36 hours would be enough to save her. We survived the August 7th hearing. Noel presented evidence of Rivera fraud coordination. Judge Brennan denied the prenup motion, and Vivica walked out of family court still owning her company. But surviving wasn't winning. 5 weeks later, the real weapon detonated. My wife's name appeared in the Wall Street Journal on September 10th, 11 years after her death, listed between victim 19 and victim 21 in Rivera Pharmaceuticals' $2.1 billion fraud. I read the article at 7:06 a.m., standing in my Tribeca office with coffee going cold in my hand. The morning light off the Hudson turned the newsprint harsh and unforgiving. Vesper Gonzalez's byline sat at the top. Wall Street Journal investigative reporter, 41, 15-year veteran of financial crime coverage, Pulitzer finalist in 2022 for a pharmaceutical fraud expose that had destroyed 3 executives and 1 senator. Her sourcing was meticulous, her prose clinical. Among the 23 documented fatalities, Yvonne Morgan, venture capitalist wife of Thurston Morgan, died November 2013 from cardiac complications attributed to NX774 interaction effects deliberately omitted from FDA disclosure. My hands shook. The paper crinkled. Vesper had woven together 14 months of evidence. I'd fed her through Noel, leaked internal Rivera memos, 2 pharmaceutical whistleblowers, falsified safety data from the clinical trials. The article detailed how Rivera Pharma had known NX774 caused fatal cardiac events in patients with specific genetic markers, had buried that data, and had marketed the drug anyway. 23 deaths, $2.1 billion in profit. Zero accountability until now. My phone rang. Noel's voice came through sharp with caffeine and vindication. Rivera Group stock just opened down 34% in pre-market trading. 3 board members resigned at 6:45 a.m. before the market even opened. Vesper's sourcing is airtight. Your evidence, the whistleblowers, everything. Rivera's legal team can't suppress this. It's already viral. 11 years. My wife's murder was finally public record, her name printed in the newspaper that had once profiled my venture capital legacy. I tasted salt and realized I was crying. The FBI wiretap from the Rivera penthouse came through at 6:23 p.m. that evening. I was still in my office, still holding that morning's newspaper, when the audio file arrived, encrypted on my secure phone. Special Agent Marcus Holloway's text read, "Listen to this. Your daughter just walked into the lion's den." I pressed play. Vivica's voice came through, shaking but controlled. "My mother's name is on this list. Yvonne Morgan. You killed her, and then you sent your son to marry me. Why?" Background noise, crystal glasses, expensive furniture, creaking. Then Dashiell Rivera's voice, cold as January water. "I knew who your father was before we ever introduced Wendell to you. Thurston Morgan, the venture capitalist, who tried investigating NX774 in 2014, asking questions, making inquiries. We needed his silence. Your marriage guaranteed it." My daughter's voice on the wiretap, asking the man who'd orchestrated her mother's murders why he'd targeted her family, and I couldn't reach through the recording to protect her. "You married me to my husband as what, leverage, insurance, strategy," Dashiell said flatly. "Your father had Wall Street connections, investigative instincts, money to fund a proper inquiry. We couldn't risk him exposing the NX774 fraud. So we neutralized the threat. Wendell courted you, married you, acquired access to your father's financial operations through family connection. And we monitored everything, his bank accounts, his communications, his movements. For 10 years, Thurston Morgan stayed quiet. Quiet because threatening us meant threatening his daughter's marriage. It worked perfectly. Until now," Vivica whispered. "Until now." Dashiell agreed. "But you're still married to my son. You're still bound by prenuptial agreements, corporate entanglements, shared assets. Leaving won't be simple, Vivica. It will be expensive and public and destructive." The recording ended. They'd targeted my daughter as punishment for trying to expose my wife's murder. The marriage was retaliation, and Vivica had been collateral damage for a decade. I sat in the dark office watching the city lights blur through window glass and felt rage crystallize into something colder than anger. Purpose. I texted Vivica Gianelli's 8:30, "Come alone." She arrived at 8:42 p.m., eyes red but dry, carrying the Wall Street Journal, folded to Vesper's article. The trattoria smelled like garlic and tomato sauce and decades of family recipes. We sat at the back corner table where I'd given her the toy car 2 months ago, the recorder that had captured everything we now knew. "They killed Mom," she said quietly. "They married me to weaponize me against you. And you've been running a federal investigation for over a year while I trusted them." She looked up and her expression was devastation held together by fury. What happens to me now? You survive, I said. Your mother's last wish was for you to succeed without my shadow. I kept that promise until keeping it meant losing you to the family that murdered her. I won't apologize for choosing you over her memory. Otis Ward appeared from the back hallway carrying a leather portfolio. He set it on the table between us. DOJ Immunity Agreement. Full cooperation testimony against Rivera Group, complete protection from corporate fraud charges related to Novatech financing. You walk away clean, they go to prison. You just have to choose survival. The DOJ Immunity Agreement sat between us like a life raft in shark-infested water. Imperfect salvation, but the only way she'd survive what was coming. Vivica opened the portfolio, read 3 pages in silence, then looked at me. If I do this, I lose everything. The marriage, the Rivera money, probably Novatech when the scandal hits. You lose everything that was built on lies, I said quietly. What you keep is what's real. Your company, your reputation, your freedom, and me. She signed at 9:47 p.m., her signature shaking, but legible. When we stood to leave, she stepped around the table and embraced me the first time since she'd discovered my identity 5 weeks ago. She smelled like jasmine perfume and fear and determination. I'm sorry about Mom, she whispered against my shoulder. So am I said. But we're going to make them pay for what they did, together. When we left the trattoria, Noel was waiting at the curb with news that turned my stomach. Wendell just boarded a private jet to Grand Cayman, no return flight filed. The rats are abandoning ship, and we have 72 hours before Rivera assets disappear into offshore accounts the FBI can't touch. The FBI didn't waste the 72 hours. By October 6th, they'd turned that deadline into a weapon. Agent Holloway's text arrived at 6:47 a.m. Warrant signed, 48 hours to execution. Recommend daughter stays inside until arrests complete. I called him immediately. You have them. Federal warrants executed October 8th, 5:47 a.m. simultaneous across 3 jurisdictions. His voice was sharp with caffeine and satisfaction. RICO, wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. Wendell's in Grand Cayman, but we have extradition treaty. Dashiell's still in Manhattan. We're moving. My daughter and granddaughter, they're protected during the arrests. Rivera has private security mercenaries on payroll. Safe house in Westchester, 24-hour FBI protection detail. Vivica and May stay inside until Dashiell's in custody. No exceptions. May. 3 years old, my granddaughter, Vivica's daughter, from the marriage that had been designed as a weapon against our family. She had Vivica's eyes and my wife's smile, and she drew unicorns with purple crayons while federal agents guarded the windows. Noel arrived at my Tribeca office at 9:15 a.m. with operational briefing documents stamped confidential in red block letters. The paper smelled like printer toner and federal bureaucracy. He spread 3 folders across my desk. Coordinated asset seizures across 14 states, targeting $2.3 billion in Rivera Group holdings, he said. Real estate investment accounts, shell corporations, offshore trusts. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network has been building the seizure list for 6 months. When Dashiell and Wendell go down, the empire goes with them. $2.3 billion frozen simultaneously the moment handcuffs closed. The federal government moving like a scalpel, excising the tumor that had killed my wife and weaponized my daughter. Vivica knows the timeline, I asked. She knows. She's scared but steady. May thinks they're on vacation in the country house. Better that way. I spent October 6th preparing for what came after the arrests, witness protection, logistics, corporate restructuring for Novatech. Once the Rivera connections severed security protocols for Vivica's eventual return to public life. The operational details kept my hands busy and my mind away from the image of May drawing unicorns, while her other grandfather's mercenaries prowled somewhere in Manhattan. The next morning, October 7th, at 10:00 a.m., Vivica's independent attorney called an emergency meeting. Rachel Davenport, 47, sharp-featured with steel-gray hair pulled back in a bun, 20-year matrimonial specialist, who'd made her reputation dismantling predatory prenuptial agreements. She'd identified what the Rivera family lawyers had buried in Section 14C before they could detonate it. We met at her Midtown office, 32nd floor, overlooking Bryant Park. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Vivica sat across from me, looking exhausted but determined. Otis stood by the door, always the sentinel. Rachel slid a highlighted prenuptial agreement across the polished table. Section 14C activates upon discovery of corporate fraud by either spouse. All assets, your Novatech equity, personal accounts, investment portfolio, transfer to Rivera Family Trust. You're left holding $4.7 million in corporate debt, personally guaranteed, December 15th. Vivica's face went pale. I don't have $4.7 million. I'll be bankrupt. They designed this to destroy me even after the arrests. No, I said quietly. They designed it to scare you into silence. It won't work. My granddaughter. May, 3 years old, drawing pictures of unicorns in a safe house, had no idea her other grandfather was about to be arrested for murdering her grandmother. And she'd never know her mother had almost been bankrupted as punishment for choosing justice. Rachel continued, her voice clinical. The debt activates whether or not you proceed with testimony. It's a financial landmine designed to detonate regardless of your cooperation with federal authorities. Unless the debt is cleared before the arrests trigger Section 14C enforcement, you'll face immediate bankruptcy proceedings. How long do we have? Otis asked. Arrests are scheduled for dawn October 8th. Section 14C enforcement begins automatically upon Wendell's federal custody, roughly 24 hours. Vivica looked at me across the table, and I saw my wife's expression in her face, the same stubborn refusal to be destroyed by people who thought money was power. I'll handle it, I said. 10 minutes later, I was on the phone with my wealth management team at Morgan Horizon Ventures. The office smelled like coffee and old leather. Through my window, the Hudson River moved like molten silver under October sunlight. $4.7 million Morgan Horizon liquidation account wire transfer to creditors listed in the Novatech liability schedule, I said. Clear the debt. Do it now. My wealth manager, professional to his core, didn't question the instruction. Confirmed. Processing immediate wire transfer. Estimated completion 90 minutes. Vivica had followed me back to my office. She stood in the doorway watching me make the call, and when I hung up, she said quietly, Dad, that's your retirement capital. You can't just... I built 3 venture capital firms over 30 years, I said, turning to face her. I can rebuild wealth. I can't rebuild my daughter. The money means nothing if you're destroyed trying to testify against them. $4.7 million transferred in 90 minutes. Erasing debt like chalk marks on a blackboard, money buying what it always bought for people like me, protection for the people I loved. The confirmation came through at 12:53 p.m. All creditors paid in full. Corporate debt cleared. Section 14C neutralized before the Rivera family could weaponize bankruptcy against my daughter. Vivica hugged me in my office, and she was crying but smiling, and she whispered, Thank you. Always, I said. At 1:07 p.m., Noel forwarded an encrypted message from FBI surveillance. I read it 3 times before the implications crystallized into cold fear. Dashiell Rivera just liquidated $340 million in offshore accounts and purchased one-way tickets to Jakarta for himself, Wendell, and 3 armed security contractors. Departure October 7th, 11:30 p.m., 16 hours before the arrest warrants executed. They were running, and they had mercenaries, and if they made that flight, extradition from Indonesia would take years we didn't have. I called Holloway. They're fleeing. Tonight. Jakarta. You need to move now. We're already mobilizing, he said. Meet us at Teterboro Airport 9:00 p.m. We're going to intercept them before they board. The airport interception happened exactly as Holloway promised. At 11 home, October 7th, FBI tactical teams surrounded Dashiell and Wendell Rivera at Teterboro Private Terminal 43 minutes before their Jakarta flight departed. No shots fired. 3 security contractors surrendered immediately when they saw federal badges and automatic weapons. By midnight, both Riveras were in custody, and the dawn arrests were just formality. The federal raids began at 5:47 a.m. across 3 Manhattan locations simultaneously: Wendell at Rivera Group headquarters, Dashiell at the penthouse, and I was in Queens watching it all unfold through Noel's encrypted feed. My apartment smelled like old coffee and the radiator steam heat that never quite worked properly. The furniture was second-hand purchased 11 years ago when I'd constructed this cover identity: retired consultant, modest means, humble father, living in a rent-controlled 2-bedroom. The laptop on my kitchen table was worth more than everything else in the apartment combined. Agent Holloway's voice came through the encrypted audio. Both targets in custody. Intercepted them at Teterboro last night, 11:17 p.m., 43 minutes before Jakarta departure. They never saw us coming. On the video feed, I watched federal agents lead Wendell out of Rivera Group headquarters in handcuffs. He wore a tailored suit that cost more than 3 months of my supposed rent. His expression was cold fury, barely controlled. The second feed showed Dashiell at the penthouse, also handcuffed, also wearing expensive fabric like armor. He looked older in the harsh morning light, 63, going on 80, stress-carving lines around his mouth. The third feed broke my heart and mended it simultaneously. Vivica stood in the Rivera Group lobby holding May's hand. My granddaughter, 3 years old, wearing purple sneakers with unicorn laces, watched the federal agents with wide eyes. "Mommy, why are those men taking Daddy?" May's voice came through crystal clear. "Does Grandpa Thurston know he fixes things?" Vivica knelt down eye level with her daughter, and her voice was steady despite everything. "Yes, baby. Grandpa knows. Everything's going to be okay now, I promise." My granddaughter thought I fixed things, 3 years old, absolute faith that Grandpa Thurston made problems disappear, and for once in her short life she was exactly right. Noel sat across from me at the kitchen table monitoring parallel feeds on his own laptop. "Stock market opens in 2 hours. Rivera Group trading will be halted by 9:35 a.m. Board's calling emergency session to appoint interim leadership. Your daughter's Nova Tech is completely insulated. We made sure of that weeks ago." "Good," I said, watching May hold her mother's hand as they walked out of the building, away from the husband and father who'd been designed as a weapon against our family. At 10:00 a.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 sharp raps, professional and impatient. I opened it to find 2 attorneys in $1,000 suits standing in the hallway that smelled like decades of other people's cooking. The lead attorney was Harrison Sterling, 62, silver-haired and sharp-featured lead partner at Sterling and Whitmore, LLP, representing Rivera family interests, 30-year matrimonial law veteran who'd built a career on high-net-worth asset seizures. Behind him stood Melissa Whitmore, 41, his senior associate, blonde and efficient-looking, carrying a leather portfolio stamped with court seals. Harrison's expression was professional condescension, mixed with barely concealed satisfaction. "We're here to execute asset seizure pursuant to Rivera v. Morgan Rivera prenuptial enforcement. We understand you're Vivica's father, currently unemployed, residing in this rent-controlled apartment." I stepped aside. "Come in." They walked into my modest kitchen, scanning the cheap furniture and second-hand appliances with obvious disdain. Melissa set the portfolio on my kitchen table next to my coffee mug. Then Otis Ward stepped out of my bedroom, followed by Special Agent Marcus Holloway and Noel. All three wore suits that cost more than my entire apartment's supposed furnishings. Harrison Sterling stopped mid-sentence, his face registering confusion, then recognition, then something approaching horror. "Harrison," Otis said pleasantly. "Been a while. Your clients are currently in federal custody on RICO charges. The asset seizure motion is moot." Harrison stared at Otis, then at me, and I watched the pieces fall into place behind his eyes. Otis Ward, legendary corporate attorney, who only represented clients worth 9 figures minimum. Otis Ward, who'd been my legal counsel for 30 years, who'd helped structure Morgan Horizon Ventures, who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals. "Wait!" Harrison's voice came out strangled. "Otis Ward represents you, only represent, oh my God, you're Thurston Morgan, the Thurston Morgan. We've been trying to bankrupt Thurston Morgan." Melissa Whitmore's portfolio slipped from her hands, scattering court documents across my linoleum floor. The Queen's apartment had been camouflaged for 11 years, cheap furniture, hiding a Wall Street fortune, anonymity, purchased with rent-controlled humility. "The $4.7 million your clients intended to weaponize," I said quietly, "cleared yesterday afternoon. Morgan Horizon liquidation account. The prenup trap stopped existing 18 hours before you filed the enforcement motion." Harrison sat down heavily in one of my second-hand kitchen chairs. His face had gone pale. "You let us think the Queen's apartment, the modest lifestyle, the unemployed father story. It was all cover identity." "I prefer the term strategic anonymity," I said. "My daughter needed protection from your clients. You just never bothered asking who was protecting her." Melissa found her voice shaky but professional. "The financial disclosures in the divorce proceedings listed you as unemployed with no significant assets. You committed fraud." "I listed my assets accurately," I said, "under my legal name, which is in fact Thurston Morgan. You assumed I was poor because I lived modestly. That's not my problem, counselor. That's yours." Agent Holloway stepped forward, pulling federal subpoenas from his jacket. "Harrison Sterling, Melissa Whitmore, you're hereby served as material witnesses in United States vs. Rivera Group Holdings. Trial date to be determined. Your client's communications are evidence. We'll need your full cooperation." Harrison took the subpoena with shaking hands. We had no idea." "Exactly," Otis said. "You had no idea who you were actually fighting. That was the point. They left at 10:34 a.m. shell-shocked, carrying worthless court orders and federal witness subpoenas. I watched them walk down the hallway, past Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. She was watering her plants, same as every Tuesday morning, oblivious that her quiet neighbor had just revealed himself as a Wall Street legend. At 11:02 a.m. Noel's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his expression shifted to surprise. "Wendell Rivera," he said, "calling from federal detention." He put it on speaker. Wendell's voice came through strained but controlled. "Tell Thurston Morgan I want to negotiate." Noel looked at me across the kitchen table. I tasted metal adrenaline or vindication or both. "I'm listening," I said. Wendell's negotiation offer lasted exactly 4 minutes. He wanted immunity in exchange for testifying against his father. The FBI declined within the hour. They already had everything they needed. By noon, his attorney stopped returning calls. My daughter stood in my Queen's apartment doorway at 3 p.m., staring at her daughter's crayon drawing, $40 custom frame museum-quality matting, hanging beside the $10 toy car like they were equally priceless. "You framed May's drawing," Vivica said quietly. She stepped inside, touching the frame with careful fingers. "The one she gave you at the restaurant. I thought you'd throw it away after I chose Wendell over your advice." I closed the door behind her. The apartment smelled like radiator heat and the coffee I'd been drinking all morning. "I've kept every drawing she's ever given me. There are 11 more in the bedroom. museum-quality frames, archival matting. When you're a grandfather in hiding, you protect what matters. Vivica walked to my bedroom doorway and stopped. The wall opposite my bed was covered in maze artwork, unicorns and rainbows and stick figure families, each one professionally framed with acid-free backing and UV protective glass. Purple crayons and pink markers preserved like they belonged in galleries. She stood there for 17 seconds, not moving, barely breathing. Then her shoulders started shaking. "I spent 3 years thinking you didn't care about us," she whispered. "You were here the whole time framing my daughter's artwork like it belonged in the Met." I stepped beside her, looking at the wall I'd built, one drawing at a time. "I cared. I never stopped caring. I just couldn't show it the way you needed without breaking promises I'd made to your mother." We moved to the kitchen. I made tea, Earl Grey, the same blend Yvonne used to drink on Sunday mornings. Vivica sat at my second-hand table, running her fingers along the worn laminate edge. "Tell me about the promise," she said. I sat across from her, tasting bergamot and memory. "Your mother's last coherent words were, 'Make me promise you'll never abandon her.' She was dying from Rivera's drug, and she used her final strength to make me swear I'd stay in your life no matter what you did. You watched me marry Wendell." Vivica's voice was barely controlled. "You knew what they'd done to Mom, and you came to my wedding, smiled in photographs, pretended everything was fine. I promised your mother I wouldn't abandon you. Keeping that promise meant watching you marry her murderer's son and staying quiet." I met her eyes across the table. "Hardest thing I've ever done, and I'd do it again. My wife died making me promise something I couldn't refuse, and that promise cost me 3 years of watching my daughter love the family that murdered her mother." "The FBI investigation," Vivica said slowly. "The surveillance, the evidence gathering, when did that start?" 6 months after your wedding. I couldn't stop you from marrying him, but I could make sure he paid for what his family did to your mother. And I could protect you when it all came apart." The toy car, I confirmed. "The $50 million in anonymous funding, the FBI partnership, the Queen's apartment cover identity. All of it designed to keep you safe while I dismantled the family that destroyed ours." Vivica reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was tight enough to hurt. "I'm sorry I doubted you." "You had every reason to doubt," I said quietly. "I lied to you for 11 years. The only thing I never lied about was loving you." We sat in my modest kitchen, drinking tea until the afternoon light turned gold through cheap curtains, and for the first time in 3 years, my daughter didn't look at me like I was a stranger. 2 weeks later, October 22nd, Otis attended the federal arraignment at the Southern District Courthouse while I stayed in Queens. He called at 2:47 p.m. Wendell 14 counts. Dashiell 6 counts. Both not guilty pleas. His voice was clinical precision wrapped in satisfaction. Judge Helen Carmichael, presiding, 28-year veteran white-collar crime specialist, known for substantial bail requirements. She set it at $50 million each. "Did they post?" "Within an hour. Rivera legal team had the money ready. 14 felony counts, 6 counts, $50 million in bail, the federal justice system reducing 11 years of murder and betrayal to courtroom arithmetic." "Did Wendell look for me in the gallery?" I asked. Otis paused. 3 times during proceedings. Scanned every face in the courtroom like he was searching for someone specific. "You made the right call staying away. He wanted to see your reaction, gauge whether you'd gloat. You gave him nothing. I'd considered attending. Considered sitting in the front row where Wendell could see me, letting him watch the man he'd underestimated, witness his public humiliation. But denying him that satisfaction, making him search an empty courtroom for validation of my existence, that was better than any front row seat." "What's the trial timeline?" I asked. Judge Carmichael set preliminary hearings for December, trial date estimated April 2025. 6 months to prepare. DOJ prosecutors are confident your evidence, Vivica's testimony, the financial forensics. They're building an airtight case. Good. There's one more thing. Otis's tone shifted. Wendell's attorney filed motion requesting victim impact statements, be sealed from media, specifically citing concern about inflammatory details regarding Yvonne Morgan's death reaching jury pool. They're already planning trial strategy around your wife's murder, and we're 6 months from trial. I stared out my kitchen window at the Queens neighborhood where I'd lived anonymously for 11 years. Mrs. Rodriguez was walking her dog. The bodega on the corner was changing its sidewalk display. Normal life continuing, while federal prosecutors prepared to put my daughter's husband in prison for destroying mine. They can file whatever motions they want, I said quietly. Yvonne's story gets told. In open court on the record for everyone to hear. That was always the point. Understood, Otis said. I'll inform DOJ. No sealed statements, no media blackout. If they want a public trial, we'll give them one they'll never forget. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen drinking cold tea, thinking about my wife's name in the Wall Street Journal, my daughter's freedom purchased with federal immunity, my granddaughter's drawings framed on bedroom walls. The arraignment was over. The trial preparation was beginning. And somewhere in a Manhattan apartment, secured by $50 million bail, Wendell Rivera was trying to understand how the poor father from Queens had destroyed his entire family empire. I hoped he never figured it out. Some lessons should remain mysteries. Judge Carmichael denied the motion to seal victim impact statements on November 8th. 1 week later, the war ended without them ever being read. Otis called at 2:34 p.m. on November 14th. Rivera legal team accepted DOJ plea offer. Wendell and Dashiell are pleading guilty to avoid facing your daughter's testimony in open court. I sat in my Queens kitchen listening to the radiator hiss. They're surrendering. Completely. Wendell pleads to all 14 counts, Dashiell to all 6. DOJ drops conspiracy to commit murder. Your wife's death stays pharmaceutical negligence, not intentional homicide. But they're still facing decades. The trial we'd prepared for the testimony, Vivica had rehearsed the victim impact statements, all rendered moot, because Rivera's attorneys understood my daughter's testimony would destroy them completely. Otis arrived that afternoon with DOJ paperwork. He spread documents across my kitchen table: cooperation agreements, immunity grants, SEC consent decrees. DOJ executed the cooperation agreement, he said. Vivica gets complete immunity, no criminal liability, no civil exposure, no SEC enforcement, beyond the consent decree. 5-year executive ban, then she's clear to rebuild. Vivica read through the legal language. 5 years. I'll be 31 when the ban lifts. Young enough to start over. The 237 Novatech employees, I said. Their severance, paid in full from criminal forfeiture recovery, Otis confirmed. Your daughter's people are protected. Company IP reverts to public domain. No one profits from stolen patents. Vivica signed at 4:47 p.m., her signature steady. Tears on her cheeks, but smiling. It's over. It's over, I agreed. The sentencing hearing happened December 18th. I attended this time sitting in the gallery's third row beside Vivica and Otis. May was with a sitter, 3 years old, was too young to watch her father go to federal prison. Judge Carmichael presided. The courtroom smelled like old wood and the particular tension of federal criminal proceedings. Wendell stood at the defendant's table in an expensive suit that wouldn't fit prison dress code. Dashiell stood beside him, looking older than 63. Mr. Rivera Wendell. Rivera, 22 years, federal incarceration, no parole eligibility. Judge Carmichael said. Dashiell Rivera, 9 years federal incarceration. Criminal forfeiture in the amount of $1.7 billion to fund victim restitution pool. Wendell's shoulders didn't move. Dashiell's head dropped, the only acknowledgement that his empire had become restitution payments. 847 victims. I'd started this for one, for Yvonne, and the legal system had found 846 others I'd never known about. Otis leaned close. Wendell will be 72 when he's released. Dashiell 74. They'll die in federal prison effectively. I watched marshals lead them through the side door handcuffs, reflecting fluorescent light. 22 years, 9 years, 1.7 billion split among victims who'd suffered pharmaceutical fraud, securities manipulation, IP theft. Yvonne's murder had bought 22 years of justice. The legal system had worked finally. Vivica reached for my hand as we left the courthouse. Outside, December wind cut through Manhattan streets, carrying the smell of roasting chestnuts. Thank you for not giving up on Mom. For not giving up on me. I squeezed her hand. Never. 10 days later, December 28th, I stood at my Connecticut estate painting window frames. The house overlooked Long Island Sound, 3 acres I'd purchased 20 years ago when Morgan Horizon Ventures was printing money. The paint smelled like linseed oil and winter air, afternoon light turning the water silver. Vivica and May had driven up for the weekend. My granddaughter sat on the porch steps watching me work, wearing a purple jacket matching her unicorn sneakers. "Grandpa, why are you painting windows?" she asked. "You're rich. Can't you hire someone?" I dipped the brush carefully. I spent 11 years hiring people to do everything. Sometimes you paint your own windows because it reminds you what matters, making something better with your own hands. Painting windows. In December, the kind of simple task that meant nothing and everything, a Wall Street legend. With a brush doing work he could have hired out, choosing not to. May picked up a smaller brush. "Can I help?" "Absolutely." We painted together, grandfather, teaching, granddaughter, how to get edges clean, avoid drips, take time with details that mattered. Through the window, I could see Vivica in the kitchen making coffee, finally comfortable after a year of legal warfare. She came out 20 minutes later, carrying mugs, steam rising in cold air. "Dad, when the 5-year ban lifts, I'm thinking about biotech again. Different company, different approach. Think Morgan Horizon Ventures might consider seed funding." I looked at her, seeing my wife's determination in her expression, seeing the Morgan legacy continuing despite everything that had tried to destroy it. "I'm retired," I said. "But my daughter, she might know a thing or two about venture capital. Ask her in 2029. Vivica smiled, the first genuine smile in months. "I'll do that." May tugged on my sleeve. "Grandpa, when you die, can I keep the red toy car, the one from your old apartment?" I knelt beside her, paintbrush still in hand. "It's already yours, sweetheart. Always has been." She didn't know. It had recorded her grandfather, Dashiell, admitting to federal crimes, didn't know it was FBI evidence logged as Exhibit 47C in the largest white-collar prosecution of the decade. She just knew Grandpa gave it to Mommy, and Mommy gave it to her, and that made it family. Maybe that was the truest thing about any of this, not the federal sentences or billion-dollar forfeitures or the Wall Street legend, destroying an empire from Queens. Just a red plastic toy car, becoming an heirloom passed from grandfather to daughter to granddaughter, carrying stories no one would fully understand. I went back to painting windows as December sun dropped toward the Sound. My daughter. Drinking coffee on the porch, my granddaughter learning to make things better with her own hands. The war was over. The family was intact. The future was open. The toy car sat on May's bedroom shelf that night, red plastic catching lamplight, its secrets safe. The next morning, I drove to Brooklyn to say goodbye to the man who'd made those secrets matter. Noel Long ordered black coffee at our usual waterfront cafe and said 5 words that ended 32 years. "I'm retiring to Savannah." The cafe smelled like espresso and salt air from the East River. December light came through windows overlooking the water, turning everything silver and cold. We'd met here 47 times over 11 years, always the same corner table, always black coffee for him and Earl Grey for me. 32 years. Noel continued, wrapping both hands around his mug. FBI consulting, private investigations, surveillance operations. I'm 63, Thurston. Savannah has a coastal property with my name on it. Time to watch boats instead of criminals. I tasted bergamot and memory. You gave me 11 years on Rivera. 14 months of federal coordination. You handed me justice when the legal system had failed. I don't know how to thank someone for that. You already did. Noel smiled, the first genuine one I'd seen in years. You paid me fairly, trusted my work, never asked me to cross lines I couldn't cross. That's rarer than you think in this business. We sat in comfortable silence watching ferries move across water that looked like hammered steel. 32 years of professional partnership, corporate espionage cases in the 90s, venture capital, due diligence in the 2000s. Then 11 years hunting the family that murdered my wife. He'd never failed me once. The Rivera case, Noel said quietly. That was the one that mattered, wasn't it? Everything else was just keeping the lights on. Everything else was building toward it. I agreed. I just didn't know that until Yvonne died. He nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Savannah's 4 hours south. You need something, I'm a phone call away. I know. We stood to leave. At the door, Noel did something he'd never done in 3 decades. He embraced me. Quick, hard, the kind of hug that acknowledged everything words couldn't. Then he was gone, walking toward the subway that would take him to whatever came after, revenge and federal prosecutions, and justice finally served. I drove to Vivica's Brooklyn apartment that afternoon. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom in Prospect Heights, now downsized from the Manhattan penthouse that had been marital property. The building smelled like cooking and radiator heat and normal life. May opened the door, squealing. "Grandpa!" She crashed into my legs with 3-year-old enthusiasm, and I scooped her up, feeling her weight and warmth and absolute uncomplicated joy. Vivica appeared from the bedroom, wearing interview clothes, conservative suit, minimal jewelry, the armor of someone rebuilding from scratch. Interviews at 4. Entry-level analyst, 65,000 base salary. I used to make that in a week as CEO. She smiled without bitterness. Turns out humility has a price tag. You're rebuilding the right way, I said. Ground up, earned, no shortcuts. Your mother would be proud of that choice. Vivica interviewing for an analyst position at 31, starting over, with nothing but her brain and my quiet support. Exactly what her mother wanted, earned success without my name buying shortcuts. May tugged on my jacket. Grandpa, Mommy says we're moving to a smaller place next month, but I get to keep all my drawings and the red car. That's all I need, right? I knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that were Vivica's and Yvonne's, and somehow entirely her own. That's exactly all you need, sweetheart. Everything else is just decoration. My granddaughter understood something. It took me 60 years to learn what you keep matters more than what you lose. Vivica made coffee while May showed me her latest artwork, unicorns and rainbows, and a stick figure family labeled in purple crayon, Mommy May, Grandpa Thurston. No Wendell. She'd already rewritten her world to fit the truth. Dad, Vivica said from the kitchen doorway. Thank you. For the debt clearance, for the legal protection, for never giving up on me when I married into... She stopped, glancing at May. When I made choices you disagreed with. You're my daughter, I said simply. There's nothing to thank me for. That evening, back at my Connecticut estate, Otis arrived with final legal paperwork. We sat in my study, overlooking the Sound, December darkness turning the water invisible beyond the windows. The documents spread across my desk smelled like fresh ink and possibility. Thurston Morgan Memorial Foundation, Otis said, reviewing the incorporation papers. $50 million endowment, pharmaceutical safety advocacy mission, FDA clinical trial transparency reform. This will outlive all of us. The foundation, paperwork weighed less than a pound, $50 million, of accountability compressed into 63 pages of corporate charter and mission statement. 847 victims shouldn't be a statistic in a federal sentencing memo, I said. Yvonne's name on a foundation means her death forces industry change every clinical trial disclosure, every safety review, every pharmaceutical company that thinks about cutting corners will face the accountability she never got. I'd spent 11 years seeking revenge. The foundation transformed that revenge into prevention, future Yvonne's protected by the one I couldn't save. I signed the incorporation papers at 9:47 p.m., my signature, creating something that would exist long after federal prison sentences ended, long after the Rivera Empire became case study in business school ethics courses. Yvonne's name would mean protection, transparency, reform. Otis witnessed the signature, notarized the documents, and shook my hand. Your wife would be proud of this, Thurston. Not the revenge, the healing that came after. At 10:03 p.m., my phone lit up with email from Vivica. Subject line, new beginnings. Got the analyst job. Start January 2nd. May wants to know if you'll teach her to paint windows at the Connecticut house on weekends. We're saying yes to imperfect new beginnings. Love you, Dad. I sat in my study, holding the phone, looking at words that meant my daughter had chosen rebuilding over bitterness, chosen teaching. Her daughter's skills over buying her things, chosen family, over everything the Rivera money could have provided. The story wasn't over, it was finally starting right. I replied to Vivica's email at 10:14 p.m. Every weekend, bring paintbrushes and patience. Love you both. 2 months later, those weekends had become our routine. January dawn broke over Long Island Sound, from the deck of the house my wife never lived to see, and for the first time in 11 years, I felt something close to peace. The Connecticut coastal estate overlooked water that moved like liquid silver in the early light. Sailboats dotted the horizon, white triangles against gray sky. The air tasted like salt and winter cold, clean and sharp. I held my coffee mug Earl Grey with bergamot, same blend Yvonne used to drink, and watched the sun climb above the waterline. Yvonne wanted this house. The Connecticut coast sailboats visible from the kitchen, quiet mornings watching sunrise over the Sound. I bought it 11 years late, but I bought it. She never stood on this deck, never saw this view, never drank morning coffee, watching boats move across water she'd dreamed about since we were young. But somehow she was here anyway. My phone buzzed at 6:52 a.m. Text from May sent by Vivica's phone. A photo of a crayon drawing stick figure me, standing on a deck overlooking blue water with sailboats. And beside me, another figure taller wearing what looked like a dress hair drawn in careful purple loops. The caption read, Grandpa and Grandma watching boats together. Mommy says Grandma's always with you even though I never met her. I drew her standing next to you so you're not lonely. My granddaughter saw what I'd been searching for. Yvonne wasn't gone. She was standing beside me watching the sunrise we'd planned to share 3 decades ago. The red plastic toy car sat on the deck table beside my coffee mug. $10 artifact worth more than the entire estate. I picked it up, feeling the cheap plastic warm from my hand, and I could almost hear Yvonne laughing at the absurdity of everything. Wall Street legend, drinking expensive tea, holding a child's toy, while federal prisoners served decades for murdering her. We did it. I whispered to the sunrise. They're paying. Vivica's safe. May's happy. The foundation has your name. We did it. The wind off the Sound didn't answer, but I felt the response anyway. Vivica's car pulled into the driveway at 11:03 a.m. I heard it from inside, distinctive engine sound, expensive and precise. Too expensive for an entry-level analyst's salary. I walked outside and stopped. The Bugatti Chiron sat in my driveway, Arctic white with carbon fiber accents, $3 million of automotive engineering that looked obscene against Connecticut winter landscape. Vivica stood beside it, holding May's hand. The Bugatti. You bought this for Mom 30 years ago, and Rivera stole it when they stole everything else. Federal asset forfeiture finally returned it. I walked closer, touching the hood. The metal was cold and smooth and utterly meaningless. $3 million of metal and leather. Your mother drove it twice, said it felt like wearing someone else's expensive shoes. Beautiful, but never quite right. The Bugatti in my driveway was a $3 million tombstone, beautiful, expensive, and ultimately just a reminder of something dead that no amount of money could resurrect. Vivica pulled a small wrapped box from her coat pocket. May helped me pick this out. $10 at Brooklyn Toy Store. Red plastic 4 wheels actually fits in your pocket. I think Mom would have preferred it. I unwrapped the package slowly. Inside, pristine red plastic toy car, identical to the one sitting on my deck table, identical to the one that had recorded federal crimes and destroyed an empire. She would have, I said, voice catching. She absolutely would have. May tugged on my hand. Now you have two, Grandpa, one for each pocket. Exactly right, sweetheart. We spent the afternoon painting window frames, May learning to use a brush properly, Vivica helping steady the ladder. 3 generations, making something better with our own hands, while a $3 million car sat ignored in the driveway. Late January. I returned to my Manhattan office for the first time in 12 years. Morgan Horizon Ventures, 30th floor, overlooking Central Park, where winter trees stood like black lace against snow. The nameplate outside read, Thurston Morgan, Chairman Emeritus. No more Queen's apartment anonymity, no more hiding behind retired consultant fiction. Just my name, public, unafraid. The office smelled like furniture polish and old money, and the particular silence of high-floor Manhattan real estate. My mahogany desk, the same one I'd abandoned in 2013 when Yvonne died, and revenge became my only business plan, held twin red plastic toy cars positioned like bookends. Original $10 car on the left. Vivica's gift on the right. $20 combined, worth more than every asset Morgan Horizon had ever liquidated. 11 years, from wife's death to federal sentencing, revenge to redemption. Wall Street legend to Queens. Apartment ghost to public chairman emeritus. And the only thing that mattered was 2 plastic cars worth $20 combined. The Yvonne Morgan Memorial Foundation annual report sat beside them. I read through the summary. 23 full scholarships funded, one for each victim who died in the NX 774 trial. Pharmaceutical reform legislation, lobbying, FDA clinical trial, transparency advocacy, victim family support networks. 847 victims, 23 deaths, 1 foundation, making sure it never happened again. Yvonne's name funding future pharmaceutical researchers who'd never falsify data because they understood the cost. My phone rang. Vivica's number. Dad, May wants to know which toy car you love more, the old one or the new one. I looked at them on my desk, red plastic catching afternoon light through floor-to-ceiling windows. Tell her the truth, they're worth exactly the same, which is everything. She says that doesn't make sense. It will. Someday she'll understand that some people measure value in dollars. We measure it in red plastic and second chances. Vivica laughed, and the sound was Yvonne's laugh 30 years ago, and May's laugh 3 years from now, and every generation of Morgan women who'd ever chosen integrity over easy money. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Vivi. I hung up and sat at my desk overlooking Central Park twin toy cars, flanking foundation reports, nameplate declaring my identity to anyone who cared to read it. No more hiding. No more revenge. No more 11-year wars fought from anonymous apartments. Just a father who'd protected his daughter, honored his wife's memory, and learned the difference between price and value. The war was over. The family was whole. The future was open. And Yvonne was standing beside me, watching it all unfold, same as she'd been since that February morning in 2013 when she'd made me promise to never abandon our daughter. I'd kept that promise. Finally, completely, I'd kept it. And to you, listening to my story, remember this: revenge and justice are not the same thing. Looking back, I wonder if I chose right. Hiding my identity from Vivica, watching her marry into the family that killed her mother. Those decisions cost me years I can't recover. Don't make my mistake of thinking you must carry every burden alone. The weight of secrets nearly destroyed what I was trying to protect. Here's what I learned from this family story's revenge. True value isn't measured in Wall Street fortunes or billion-dollar empires. It's measured in red plastic toy cars and Sunday mornings painting windows with your granddaughter. Family stories, revenge, like mine, teach us that seeking justice for those we love isn't wrong. But we must be careful that revenge doesn't consume us. I believe God put me through this journey to learn what really matters. At 60, I finally understand what my wife knew: the people you love and the promises you keep are worth more than any amount of money can buy. These family stories, revenge, show us that redemption is possible even after the darkest chapter. If this touched your heart, share your thoughts below. What would you have done? Told the truth sooner or kept the promise? If this story resonated, please share it and subscribe to Dad Family Revenge for more real stories about family and second chances. Thank you for staying until the end. Some details have been adapted for storytelling, but the core message about family sacrifice and true value, that's what I hope stays with you.